The committee of the whole is back in order. Welcome back, colleagues. And Senator Gumatata, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Chair. As you recall, GIAA officials informed senators in July 2025 that the airport was owed $9.25 million in fuel tax arrears, and that if collected, the revenue would be used for the airport's debt service. As everyone in this room is aware, Section 8 of Chapter 13, Public Law 38-60, authorizes the governor of Guam, notwithstanding any other provision of law, to utilize her 50% fiscal year 2026 general fund executive branch appropriations transfer authority to pay prior year obligations of aviation fuel tax arrearages in compliance with Federal Aviation Administration requirements to the AB WAMPAD International Airport Authority. Senator Tina Muñoz-Barnes introduced Bill 229-38 in November 2025, Mr. Chair, seeking to appropriate $9,254,625 from the fiscal year 2025 net unobligated excess revenues to pay prior year obligations of aviation fuel tax arrearages in compliance with Federal Aviation Administration requirements to the AB WAMPAD International Airport Authority. According to BBMR, through the fiscal note for Bill 229-38, it appeared as of December 5th, 2025, that there was sufficient net unobligated FY 2025 general fund revenue to fund the proposed $9.2 million appropriation as proposed by the ranking member. So my question is to Chairman Bamba, specific to the $9,254,625 appropriation to the Department of Administration to pay prior year obligations for aviation fuel tax arrearages in compliance with Federal Aviation Administration requirements, will the appropriation here and now, if authorized, make GIAA solvent and solid for the balance of fiscal year 2026, as the Finance Chair asked during the June 30, 2026 joint oversight hearing?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. When we initially came to the body for the oversight hearing, our request was for $17.7 million, and in addition to the aviation fuel tax amount of 9.3. And so following that, which has now been put into this bill, is the $17 million, and a portion of that would go to pay the aviation fuel tax. And so there is still a portion, call it $9 million, that the airport would be seeking. And right now we're looking to utilize the funds to defease so that we can meet our debt service obligations for FY26. I hope that answers your question.
So will the Guam International Airport Authority be made solvent, will it be solvent and solid for the balance of fiscal year 2026?
And thank you so much for that question, Senator Gumatata. So, of course, with regards to, when we initially came to the legislature and we discussed the issue of the $9.25 million, we had thought at the time that we would be able to use that for, or as part of our revenues to include in our debt service coverage ratio calculation. But because we'd already recorded those as revenues, we cannot use those again in that debt service coverage ratio calculation. So that is why we, as we've been talking about how we're going to use the funding, the $17.7 million, the $9.25 million would actually have to go to our O&M reserve. So the bond covenants or the bond indenture, they require a certain flow of funds, right? So the monies have to be placed in certain pools. It's called a waterfall. So that they have to be placed in certain pools first before they can go to the next. So because we have recorded that as revenue, then that goes into our revenue trust, and then it goes into our O&M trust or our O&M reserve, and that's where it'll sit until the point that our O&M reserve fund is complete. It's going to be the additional $8.4 million appropriated that is going to be used for the defeasance that's going to help us to be able to get through FY26 without having to increase our rates, and also is going to allow for us to be able to meet our 1.25 minimum debt service coverage ratio required.
Okay, I will go back and I want to reiterate for the record. Are you saying on the record today that the Guam International Airport Authority, if we give this appropriation today, you all will be solvent and solid?
What I can say is that with regards to the funding needed, because there's a few things we're talking about. We, through the airline agreement and as part of our budget process, have the ability to determine rates, of course in consultation with the airlines, and those rates are meant to cover our expenses. The $17.7 million, how it would work if 9.2 or 9.3 approximately is going to be used or is going to be the prior year aviation fuel tax, then that leaves 17.7 minus the 9.3, which is 8.7 left to be able to use for our, or 8.4, excuse me, going to be used toward the defeasance. And then the $400,000 is going to be used to put into our CIP. The issue is, so when we come into FY27, as we mentioned, for every dollar of expense that we're able to save, or for every dollar that's going to be appropriated, we're going to be able to reduce our cost per enplane packs by $1. So we started at 55. We found savings of $3 million in our expenses. So 55 minus 3 is going to be 52. And then we're going to be able to, if the legislature is able to appropriate these monies to us, the additional money, call it 10. So from 52 minus 10, we'll be at about 42, a little bit over 42, in terms of our CPE for FY 2027. And of course, we're trying to target to maintain our CPE to a level of $34.99 is the current. Of course, if there's need to be a slight increase, yes, but so this 17.7 will really just allow for us to bring the CPE for FY 2027 to the low 40 level and not bring it to the 39. So again, we're 34.99, which is what it is in FY 2026.
So, to be clear, are you all, is the airport authority asking or requesting for $17 million or $17 million plus another $9.3 million to cover aviation fuel tax arrears? I see a head shaking on one end, so can I...
originally, like what the chair said, Senator, was we did come in and request for $17.7 million, not including the aviation fuel tax, because that aviation fuel tax is kind of like a debt, right? And so it's already covered, or it's already identified as revenue for the airport, although we didn't receive it yet.
Okay, I'm gonna...
So in total, really, if you look at it, it's, you take the 9 and the 17, and that's really what we need to get it down to the 34.99 CPE.
So according to your FY 2025 audit, the cost per enplane passenger increased by 9.1%, rising from $30.85 the previous year to $33.66 in FY25. Now, the increase was primarily driven, according to the audit, primarily driven by higher signatory airline fees, also terminal building rentals and arrival fees, while employments remained stable. For the benefit of those that are watching the discussion today, does the Guam International Airport Authority anticipate any further passenger fee increases over at least the next 2 to 3 years? If this is the case, how much more should travelers expect to pay moving forward?
Okay, thank you, Senator Gumatauta. Regarding the audit and then the calculation of the $33.66 CPE for in our actual FY 2025 audit using those numbers. To clarify, there is as I mentioned earlier, we actually built into our FY 2026 budget a $3 million bond defeasance. That means that we expected to retire or defease $3 million of bonds. So that 3366 actually does not reflect that we did not pass on the $3 million in our defeasance or in what was calculated in the rates to the airlines. So really, if we added that to the 3366, say we billed it or included that in the rates instead of tried to defease it, that would be the first adjustment to that 3366 to bring it to 3666. Right, that's the one thing. Because again, we didn't include it in our budget, we didn't pass it on, so that's actually something that wasn't included as part of the rates and fees. That's, again, one point. With regards to, again, to go back to this 17.7 million, so as we mentioned earlier, a portion of this is going to be able to address the FY26 rates and fees for the airlines and prevent any need for us to increase their rates and fees within this fiscal year. That's to the tune of about $8 million. The remainder portion of that, which is basically the aviation fuel tax prior year, is going to help us so that we can refill our O&M reserve. And that will help us in the $8 million is going to be able to help us in FY26. The remainder of it is going to help us in FY27. So if you think about it, and we start with 17.7 and we subtract out the 8, that gives us 9.7. And if we started out at 55, and remember we brought it down to 52 at least, our CPE, and we subtract out the 9.7, let's just call it 10, so that still brings us to 42. And when you talk about perhaps making us whole in terms of trying to cover our O&M for FY 2027, with this appropriation, without any additional adjustments to our budget, will be at about 42 in terms of our CPE. We're trying to reduce our expenses further so that way we could bring that 42 down, but at this level of an appropriation, that's approximately where we will be with regards to FY 2027.
So, Mr. Chair, I'll ask again, do you expect any passenger fee increases over the next 2 to 3 years? From your experience, from your perch on the board, do you think that there's going to be any increases that will be passed along to our passengers coming into Guam?
Thank you, Senator. And I believe that the cost that the airport passes on to the airlines, they would have to recover in their business model as well. How much, I don't know exactly, but I would assume that a cost of doing business increase to them would be passed on to travelers.
Yeah, I'm not going to put words in your mouth. So you're saying on the record that over the next 2 to 3 years, travelers into our U.S. territory can expect to see price increases to come here?
I'd expect that the cost is going up, therefore the decisions that, the economics that drive an airline to price one way or the other would also be affected.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, that's all I have for this first round. I'll save my other questions for the second round.
Yes, before we go to you, Senator Barnett, we'll have a couple-minute recess. Committee of the Whole is back in order. Senator Barnett, you're recognized.
Mr. Chair, and good afternoon to the people of Guam watching on our YouTube stream, and thank you to the panel for being here. Kind of wanted to go back to last week when the good chair abruptly recessed our special session, and the reason he recessed it was he had said something along the lines, and I couldn't review the tape, but it was something along the lines of the airports messing up or in a big mess. We weren't given any explanation for that, so we abruptly recessed in the middle of the panel on the child care block grant. So are you able to share what occurred that prompted the call for recess and what transpired over the last several days with any of the senators meeting with you guys? And then what was the issue that was the mess?
Yeah, to clarify before you answer that, what I was referring to and what I've discussed several times is the airports had meetings, particularly with the airlines, was scheduled their meeting for the fiscal year, as well as airlines have had other meetings also with senators to discuss the impact of this. And when we're dealing with this appropriation at this point, it was the impact of their meetings with the airlines for the fiscal year that will determine this critical piece. Because other than that, we would have been discussing this prior to their implementation of their fee schedule, which would have meant we wouldn't have had information on what their presentation of the numbers were going to be to the airlines to contemplate this appropriation. Airport members, please proceed.
So to answer, I guess, we did have a meeting with the airlines. It's part of our usual budget process, and we actually had given notice of that meeting maybe several months ago already, that it was going to be July 31. And so we met with them last week, Friday, to discuss our budget. Part of the budget process, again, requires consultation with the airlines as we work toward coming to a level of operation and maintenance expenses and other things that is acceptable to both the airlines and the airport. But to go back to perhaps what Senator Gumatauto was asking, and to clarify, what we're hoping to do and what our goal is to try to figure out how to address FY26 and FY27 rates and fees so that we don't have to increase our rates for the airlines, which, I guess as Speaker Blas mentioned earlier, is not just help the airport, but also really it's about the entire community, because if we raise airline rates and charges, it will impact the whole community. And and there's that ripple effect to perhaps cause the scaling back or even perhaps ceasing of some of the flights coming to Guam. In order for us to get to a level for rates that will bring our rates down to FY26 levels or help us to maintain FY26 levels, we will need more than $17.7 million. And again, of course, as I talked earlier, the $17.65 million currently, it's in the bill, is going to help us so that we can do a defeasance. That defeasance, it could potentially be up to $8.8 million, not just $8 million. So, there's another $800,000 that perhaps we'll need to add to the 17.65. But really, in order to be able to reduce or maintain the FY26 rates in FY27, we will need an additional, or up to maybe up to the initial 27.7 million, which is really what we had, I think, intended, or that was we understood to be asked in the last hearing.
That's what I meant, Senator. That's the real number. So now you can see there's a grand difference between what was presented in this bill. That's what I wanted to get to.
Thank you, Ms. Daphne. So basically what had happened was you had, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm just trying to get the narrative down. You had presented to the legislature that there was a need for $17 million, and was the response not timely enough? And so then you ventured down this trail to increase the fees to the airlines, and that's why we're looking at this stack of letters from the different airlines talking about the excessive cost increase, over 70% additional burden. Is that what happened? So you were in the middle of trying to raise the fees, and the senators found out and.
Actually, I think ever since, even the June 30 oversight hearing and even going back to February, there was already discussion about issues with regards to us being able to meet our debt service. I think back in February, maybe around February 14 or so was our oversight prior to June 30. So it was discussed at that time. And, as we have, in fact, what we have been doing is working because we know that if we're going to be able to meet our debt service coverage ratio for FY 2026, we need to do this bond defeasance like before this fiscal year ends. So we've already been meeting with bond counsel and underwriters just to make sure that we understand how the monies can be allocated. And so now that we've gotten further clarification and information on how these monies can be used, then we're able to determine, okay, how this money is going to be used and how it's going to be used to be able to impact the rates and charges.
So are we still trying to increase the fees for the airlines, or is that dependent on if you get the funding that you're asking for?
Correct, right. So we will have, part of the reason why we were not able to provide, or we did not provide an updated budget to the airlines when we met with them is because we also wanted to make sure that we incorporated any adjustment due to this particular legislation.
And so just for clarity, because I think some of us are a little confused, the bill is asking for $17 million with a breakdown of 8.4 for the operational safety needs given a shortfall. That's a common theme. And then you have the 9.2 million for the aviation fuel tax arrearages. Is there another 9 million ask on top of the 17?
So, Senator, when we first came in, it was 17 that we really needed, not including the 9.25 aviation fuel tax. So, really, if you were at the two, it's going up to around 27 million.
27
yes,
million.
yes, sir.
Okay.
So, when they incorporated the 9.2 into the 17 million, we were still shortchanged the 9 that we were asking. So they really, it's 9.25 that we need more to drive the cost per passenger back down to the FY26 levels of $34.99.
So if this $26 million is provided to the airport, would people of Guam see any return, reimbursement?
I'm sorry, would you please restate your question?
Are we going to get any return of the funds that are provided? If you're using them to pay an aviation fuel tax, is there some type of reimbursement that we're going to see from the $26 million?
I think what will happen is you're not going to see the passenger fee go up, where that it'll still entice the airlines to continue flying to Guam, continue to provide the service. So that's what we're hoping to make sure that we continue to do.
And what if you don't get the 26 million?
So worst case scenario, we don't get the 26 million. Then for possibly FY26, we have to go in and do a rate adjustment, and that will go up to about 60. Just for FY26, $68 per passenger fee, and then in FY27 it'll be 55.06. Yeah.
If I can just give a minute, Senator Knapp, so Lester would like to just.
Senator Barnett, if I could make an attempt to clear what I think is it is a confusing scenario. In the June 30th presentation, there was a lot, just like today, there's a lot of emphasis on debt service coverage. And the debt service coverage requires really $8.8 million to defease bonds in 2026 to then get the airport in 2026 to end the year with a debt service coverage of about 1.25 to 1.4, thus meeting bond covenants for debt service coverage. Much of the conversation has been focused on that. how to get to the debt service coverage, no default, and that requires $8.8 million. What I think is getting lost on people is the fact that there, as Senator Barnett mentioned, and I think Senator Gumatalta was trying to elicit, was they need additional funding on top of the 17 to do primarily stave off a passenger PFC increase in 27. If they get to 17, we'll be fine. In 26, we'll be fine for the next 3 months. But come 27, without additional funds, the passenger facility charge that is now $34, Daphne mentioned will go up to 42 without any budget adjustments on the airport side. So your question as to whether or not the traveling public and the people of Guam are going to receive something, we have excess revenues. We have the ability to assist in keeping the cost of air travel for us residents at the current level. I would just like to maybe regroup and hit the reset button, because the ask, I think, sometimes when you say, you think you said what it is that you're asking for, but even I'm not really clear on what the ask is. So I took a minute to try to see whether or not I could, maybe clear my mind, and let's all be on the same page saying, okay, they really would like to seek additional funding to not incur the passenger facility charge increase that the public will have to bear. Remember, every single airline wrote and said it would be pretty much disastrous, and that would probably be the impetus for us to get out of Dodge. I think I can read between the lines, and nobody was at all favorable about an increase, especially given the climate. So just to be able to try to maybe reset and go off of what Senator Barnett is talking about, I really do think we are looking at and asking for additional funds for the airport.
Thank you, Mr. Carlson. So I guess on that track, I'd like to ask you, if we give the $26 million, what does that mean for the balance of the projected excess revenues? Because many of us are still kind of combing through the governor's budget bill that she sent down. So don't really have a clear picture of what excess revenues are going to be tied up with that budget bill, and then what the balance is going to be. Should we provide this $26 million?
Senator Barnett, if I may, it's actually, I believe it's 27.7 is what the initial ask was, I believe. And so what would happen is then we would be able to, that should be sufficient to help us to be able to maintain the rates for our airlines so that we don't have to increase those rates and fees from the FY 2026 level when we come into FY 2027.
And so you need this $26 million to keep the price of the airline tickets the same for the people of Guam?
It's to keep the operational costs that the airlines, of course, incur, because they cover our expenses down. And then, of course, there's other factors that the airlines have called out, for example, the increased price of fuel. So those types of decisions, of course, are at the airline level. Yeah. But, we here, this will help us to do our part.
So we could provide the $26 million, and Mr. Carlson citing it as a benefit to the people of Guam that the price of the ticket won't go up, but the price of the ticket could still go up because of the cost of aviation fuel and other, factors.
Sir, we don't. The airport does not control the price of the ticket, but we control the price of the CPE. Yes, sir. Yeah. It'll stay stable.
Right. And so. It kind of seems like we're coming in here with a, I'd hate to use this metaphor, but with a gun to our head. So if we don't provide the $26 million, then we're going to see the airport increase the fees by how much?
157. It'd be about initial from $34.99 to $55.06.
How much
but
percent
for FY26, it'll go up to 68.
Yes, and for FY26 from $34.99.
The last 2 months.
Yes, 68 for the last 2 months.
And I know that the senator from TYPHOON was talking about the governor's transfer authority. Has there been any conversation with the ability of the governor to transfer funds? Is she able to transfer funds to you?
No, she's not, sir.
Okay. Thank you. And I've always said, you know, that it's with a lot of these shortfalls and these short changings, it's hard to transfer from a short to fill a short. So yeah, I'm not even sure how we proceed with this. But I wanted to ask because in this term and a little bit of the prior one, some of the senators have passed what they've called revenue generating abilities for the airport to be able to, you know, lease your properties, et cetera, et cetera. So if you could kind of go over some of those new authorities that you have and how you've used them to generate that revenue, and whether any of those generated revenues can go to offset, you know, future instances like the one we're in now.
Absolutely. Thank you, Senator. So with regards to the two pieces of legislation that have been passed, or I guess the one that's most important is the one that has to do with our policies and procedures and also the extension of our lease terms to up to 50 years and our concession terms to up to 15 years. And of course, the policies and procedures for our board actually had passed those policies and procedures just this past January, so that way we could move forward with you know, these updated or up to 50-year leases and up to 15-year concessions.
So so the policies and procedures that you formulated in January were for the airport's ability to.
They actually had to do with our ability to, so we had to create policies and procedures so that way we could have those in place for our leases and our concessions.
Senator, if I could just add, and the board had passed those earlier this year, and there have been active discussions with potential interest, and I think we've also issued RFIs or solicitations of interest for various properties on the airport for both aeronautical and non-aeronautical, so basically just opening it up to whoever would express interest. There is a climate in the economy that affects many people, including these airlines and potential tenants in their own operations. And so while there is interest, we understand that they also are affected by the high cost of fuel. So when you start talking about, you know, these long, high capital improvements or high capital investments and long-term leases, there's a lot of analytics and business decisions that go into that. And so I think as the economy recovers, as things improve, as, you know, whatever's happening globally subsides and cost of doing business subsides, or at least comes to a manageable level, I think we'll still see that interest, you know, in areas such as long-term leases for hangar construction and things like that.
So we haven't seen any actual commitment, because I remember at the time we were debating and discussing this, one of the senators who was really pushing for it had said something like, oh, there's a company right now and they want to come and they want to do business, but to senior because our law is too tight. So since you've developed these rules and regs, what has come of those conversations? Because, you know, they were kind of passed with the mindset that people were ready to go and they were just, you know, banging on your door to lease the property, both on the aeronautical and the non-aeronautical side.
No, I believe that interest still exists. It's just that I think that the economic climate has changed to where some of those decisions need to be taken a look at, so, you know, to justify those returns that they would be investing in. And the airport itself continues to pursue. I mean, as a matter of fact, right now we have quite a few solicitations out for interest in some of the properties. On top of that, the rules and regs that were passed allowed for what we're going through today, which is the concession evaluations and that process that's ongoing. It's not something that happens in a day or two. It takes actually some time. So, but by way of that legislation that was supported and the policies that were passed, adopted by the board, that provides the tools for the airport to do what it's doing now.
He said exactly what I was going to say.
So you know, how many leases have you already entered into with this new authority? I thought I heard something earlier in Senator Lujan's open about a lease that for auto company or.
We'll have to get back to you on the actual count, but we did present that during our June 30 oversight hearing.
Okay, I'm sorry I wasn't able to attend. I did watch the hearing though, but if you could, you don't have any specifics on how many leases you've issued?
Yes, we will. We'll gather that for you.
Okay, well the reason I opposed bill, the couple pieces of legislation was because I felt that they didn't provide for a transparent or accountable process. And so I just wanted to ask what is the status of the property is that airport property coming into Tiza where you see all the new vehicles there, or is that a private property?
If you're referring to that stop right there by Cars Plus, where it's right there on the left where there are vehicles, that is airport property.
So what type of arrangement is that?
So that is a short-term lease for non-aeronautical space, and that particular, I believe earlier we answered this question, but that particular space, we actually receive about $15,000 per month in revenues for the rental of or the lease of the land, and it's short-term. And then we also have been able to reduce our contract for lawn care or for the grass cutting by about $3,000 a month.
And was this lease entered into using the new authority that was passed by the 38th Guam Legislature?
That was actually, it was a lease by application, and then that was the result of a lease by application. That is actually part of our policies and procedures, yes.
Lease by application?
Yes.
Okay. And I just have to ask, is there a conflict with this particular arrangement?
So in this particular matter, I actually had to take the lead on this particular item.
Why is that?
Because the executive manager recused himself from that matter.
Well, why did the executive manager recuse himself?
Because of he has a relationship with that particular leaseholder.
Okay. So that's $15,000 a month short term? Is this like month to month?
It's short term. So it's short term, and it's actually for a year. But if there is any interest if there is any other interest or interest from aeronautical, then that particular parcel will actually be able to be leased out to for an aeronautical reason. So it's short term, non-aeronautical.
Okay.
Senator, if I could just clarify something, that there is a process, and the process also calls for a fair market opinion, if we will, kind of like an appraisal. And so that was done in order to access that piece of property. And that happens to be at a premium versus what we're doing. So that lease benefits the airport significantly because we're getting revenue, number one, which is what we hoped to achieve out of the bill. And then secondly, is also helping to reduce our operating costs for not having to cut the grass.
Thank you for those answers. And Dispensa Director JQ, I just wanted to, and again, that's why I opposed it. And so I'm very glad that it appears there were conflict walls
There is.
put up. But, I just have to say for the record, it is what it is. And the people of Guam see it for what it is, respectfully.
And regarding your question earlier, in our presentation on June 30, we did indicate that the result of the board adoption after the adoption of the board's the leasing policies, we had issued an NSI, which is a notice to solicit interest. We had 26 entities who expressed interest in lease of our airport property. 9 lease contracts were actually executed, and that's $1.6 million per annum in revenue.
Okay. Sidus Masi, I don't think I have any further questions, Vice Speaker, but thank you again for providing the information. And, I'm hoping we can flesh out more details because as it stands now, it kind of seems like we're, again, I hate to use it, coming in here with a gun to our head that if we don't pass this bill and provide the $26 million, then you're going to be forced to jack up the airline fees. So, but I just hope that we can still have a productive discussion given those factors. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Barnett. Chairman Duenas, you're recognized.
This is Masi, Mr. Chair. So sometimes, of course, there's a lot of narratives that get discussed on this floor, so I think I need to ask a few questions. Can you give me a history of whenever the airport received a general fund appropriation?
Yeah, I don't recall us ever receiving a general fund appropriation.
Do you have a shortfall at the airport because of the general fund? Do you receive funds from the general fund?
We don't currently receive any funds from the
So
general.
this legislature has not been a part of your shortfall because if you don't get an appropriation from us.
Point of
correct?
personal privilege, Mr. Chair. I did not say that the airport shortfall was a result of general fund shortfalls. I said that it was a common theme.
The
Sido
narrative.
Smasi, yeah.
Important. My privilege is the narrative. There's a lot of latitude on this floor, Mr. Chair, and the narratives are soaring. So I think I have equal capability
You may
of
continue.
making my point. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So let's go back to the June 30 oversight. I specifically was looking around the room, and you remember my line of questioning with the BBMR director, correct, in terms of the ask?
I remember it.
Do you remember
I don't
me
know
specifically?
for word, but
Do you remember me specifically saying to the BBMR director that if there were to be such subsidy, that it would, I can play the tape, that it would include the revenue for the fuel tax? Because I remember a lot of looks in the back of the room. I look all around the room when there's hearings, and I looked in the back and there was some facial expressions back there like, that's not what we were talking about. Is that clear?
from my recollection, Senator, it was from that day that we were asking for 17 million, not including the aviation fuel tax. But when they added on when the conversation went on, the 17 included the aviation fuel tax. And
Yeah.
right.
Lester, was that conveyed officially between the airport personnel and yourself before you prepared the bill that was sent down?
Honestly, not as clearly as maybe we would have liked it, and then subsequent to that, the bill was drafted. So just being honest, that's how come I huddled with the guys, right? Because the bill is very specific, and if you're looking for a departure from the bill, it's kind of like, well, you got to ask for it, because right now this is what the bill says.
Would you, Lester, I mean, this is just a question knowing how meticulous, and congratulations on an award. I think, like we talked about, Guam won this award based on many years of conservative budgeting by the legislature and execution between the legislature and the executive branch, at least on the finances. You won a very prestigious award for Guam, and I want to congratulate you and the collaboration on very good budgets going forward with surplus revenues and operations now. Delivery is a different story. We can quibble on that, but the budgets have been sound. Lester, because you're that meticulous, I want to be clear. Would you consider this, I won't say chaotic, but this is not normal to have this large of a difference, right? I mean, it was right to say at least we need to get some more information on what the actual ask is.
It is a little unusual, yes, but I think if I heard Daphne correctly, you mentioned that ever since Valentine's Day, you've been conveying that you guys are going to be probably short and in need of money. And all things being equal, sir, they have been asking for the 9.2 for several years now, and we've only now come around as both the executive branch and the legislative branch to actually finally address it. Yes, it was in the budget bill, but I'm on the record as saying that the governor did not have the transfer authority to pull it off. So you're right. It's like pulling the tooth before the Novocaine went in. But hopefully, collectively, we've kind of cleared the air so we can have a more constructive conversation moving forward. Because I really do believe that the ask is certainly higher than what the bill states, and maybe we can discuss further with that in mind moving forward.
Thank you. And I'll just note for the record, I mean, this 9.2 million has been a discussion, I believe, since the fiscal year 23. Now we're contemplating fiscal year 27. So we tried to give the authority within 2 fiscal years, but okay, so we don't agree on the funding source. Good enough. So back to the airport. Guys, of course, there's been discussion the whole time through, but let's be honest with ourselves. When you sit down and put it on paper, that's when, Daphne, that's when it means something, right? When you sit down in front of the airlines and say, here's the budget, that goes from hypothetical to real, correct?
Right, and so, again, our process is really, there's consultation until we get to a final that we agree upon. But yes, of course, once we come to an agreement, then that's what we move forward with for the board to approve.
And the reality came to be on July 31st, correct?
Correct, we met with them on July 31.
Okay. So I want to be just completely respectful of the projection that you've done for months, and I respect that. But Daphne, you're a fiscal expert. You have the credentials to discuss finances, not just throwing things around in the air. You know that the only true recognition of financial impacts and finances and even financials to begin with, audited, is a process that is on paper and meticulous, correct?
Yes, Senator.
And for this legislature to have such a awesome responsibility to make a final decision on an appropriation that affects all of the operations of this government, I'm sure your professional opinion should be done with certainty when we're discussing, like now, why we're trying to be certain about what your actual ask is. Would that be accurate?
Yes.
Okay. So, Mr. Chair, that's why, maybe my language was a little soaring all over the place, but it is. And, I'm thankful to the BBMR director to go over and, huddle with the folks and say, listen, we need to be clear here. We can't have senators asking questions and not getting the certainty of what the ask is. And Mr. Chair, I'm sure that's why the bill came down in the format that it did, was because there was made mention, assumptions, but what's on paper is not that. And what the airlines, they were proactive because they had, a lead that, this may be coming, and rightly so. They talked to policymakers, right? Listen, we want you to know ahead of time that this is a very serious situation and it's going to have very serious consequences. And that's why also, even in media conversations that I've had, I said, listen, when this actually comes to fruition, which this is this process, when it officially gets on the record, it's going to be significant. And the discussion about the impacts are going to be a come to Jesus. Not because of a shortfall, not because of an appropriation that the airport traditionally has never gotten. We're in a unique position. So, Daphne, I want to go back to that. And I thank you, Director Carlson, for making this very clear. What's in the current bill will take us through this current fiscal year without any adjustments to current fiscal year, correct?
What's in the budget right now, the $17.65 million, including, of course, that $8.4 million of additional appropriation and the 9.25 million in prior year aviation fuel tax. Of that, about 8.8, I guess, will have to be used for defeasance so that we can meet our debt service coverage ratio for FY 2026, and so that we will not have to pass on our shortage to be able to be made whole to our airlines.
Okay, so my colleagues are clear on what the real ask is now, is to ensure that you have that same capability going forward into the fiscal year. How long in the fiscal year of 27 would you say that ask is for? Is it the whole fiscal year?
That's what we estimate it to be, yes.
Okay. Daphne, do you do periodic changes in favorable or unfavorable requests to the airlines in terms of aeronautical fees?
Do we, would you?
In other words, does it get adjusted outside of is the fiscal year rigid, or do you adjust up or down based on, I mean, if you had, 1.7 million employments by some miracle in the next fiscal year, would that adjust?
Well, of course, that's something we would want to make sure goes back to the airlines if there is an overage, right? Because again, the idea behind this behind even the budget process and the rate methodology for how we sorry to go back to it. As I mentioned earlier, we're not in the business of making money on the airlines. This particular situation or the rate methodology involves what's called cost recovery. So the idea is that we recover our cost. And in this time, at this point, unfortunately, that's something that's not able to happen, which is why we need the additional funding. But absolutely, if there is a need or if we are over and there is a need to adjust in the other way, that's something that can be communicated and can be done either through a current year adjustment or even through an adjustment perhaps even in the next fiscal year, if that's again something that does not have to be billed or passed on to the airlines, if that's the case.
So it's not rigid as such. It could be to the benefit of the airlines.
We call them mid-year adjustments is what we call them.
So it's contemplated on mid-year. So once again, Mr. Chair, it's very clear that this is a very serious and dynamic appropriation that could not be done just like that, and took the time of the actual fiscal year where the rubber hit the road on July 31st to be reality and not speculation, to know what this body has to do. And notwithstanding narratives, there is no general fund appropriation. And historically, I would be struggled to find one, even in 9/11, where everything was shut down for a significant period of time. And I'm sure there was absolutely no revenue coming to the airport because of the fallout from that. Lester, just one final. I mean, I'm just going to ask you, because we've pulled up, even currently, I know you've mentioned that there hasn't been, but there in the 8 years of this administration, there has been a number of transfers, and we can point them out. And I know that we looked at history as well during the time that you and Mr. Byrne actually were part of a same fiscal team. There's been a number of transfers during that time as well. So transfers, even in times of tight finances, are possible, correct?
Never a transfer, sir, other than for the executive branch agencies, not the autonomous agencies, not GPA, GWA, the port, and certainly not to the airport until this time.
So this tax is a remittance, correct? It's collected by the general fund that was not remitted, correct?
Yeah, the aviation fuel tax, we took care of, that 4 cents, 8 cents, 4 years ago, as you mentioned. And so we have been remitting the full 8 cents, and they've been the beneficiary of the full 8 cents. But the arrears still had to get addressed, and it's been a long time. Chuck Adda was at the airport. That's how long this has been going on.
What fund was it sitting in? What fund does it sit in before it goes to the airport?
There's probably a liquid fuel tax, Guam Highway Fund that Mr. Byrne keeps for remittances that are part and parcel to the sale of either aviation or diesel or gas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to bring some clarity to why the timing is so specific here and why this body didn't choose this omnibus appropriation and what gets heard first or when we hear it or the timing of the airport's request. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Duenas. Senator Talahi, you're recognized, man.
Thank you. I guess, BBMR, if Mr. Carlson, if you can explain, there was an authorization in the FY26 budget that allowed for transfer or something of the $9 million, and you said that never happened?
Yes, Senator. It was a provision allowing the governor to use her transfer authority. And the governor doesn't have that much from other executive branch agencies to pull from to provide funding for the airport. And as a matter of fact, she doesn't have sufficient funding to do anything on that list. There's like 3 things. So the answer has been we can't do it for months.
But it's one of those obligations that exist, such as overtime or payment, whether there's an appropriation, pay, right? Whether there's an appropriation or not, you're obligated to pay it, and they couldn't find any money?
Pay is different, ma'am. You're absolutely correct. If overtime is incurred by law, it has to be paid even if the overtime wasn't authorized. And, you know, there's a lot of instances that that occurs simply because things pop up on a daily basis and emergencies that we didn't foresee require the folks to incur overtime. But this one here is different. This is a, like I said, this thing came to my attention in the Cowboy administration when Chuck Adda was at the airport. So this has been with us forever.
It's the same authority, though, that you're using to pay current that liquid fuels tax.
Yeah, but there was
right?
there's no appropriation.
There's no different appropriation for it.
Well, actually, see, if you're talking about overtime, then there is an appropriation because that person does work for an agency that has an appropriation.
All right, let's talk about the liquid fuels. So the liquid fuels right now that you're paying, there's no specific appropriation in any bill. There's no law that says that. It was an FAA decision or something, and you've been honoring that, right?
4 years after we submitted a budget that rectified the full remittance of the 8 cents to the airport authority, we've been current since that time, and now we're just talking about the arrears.
Right, and I'm just talking about the authority. Okay, so, and then, so we got this bill on July 15, and then the airport went into a meeting and proposed its budget to be in July 31st, that they needed a higher amount than this bill. I don't understand how that could even happen. If you're in discussions with the governor, why wouldn't you guys have matching numbers? Are you asking, is the governor asking us now to go instead of 17 million to 27 million?
No, ma'am. The governor is not asking for anything. We're just clearing the air because the hearing that occurred on June 30th, there was a presentation by the airport. And
okay.
The airport.
So the governor's okay with this original amount? Because this is her bill.
This is her bill.
Right. So she wants the original amount?
You know, Senator, what I always tell people is that when you come down here, it's the beginning of a discussion. The bill needs to be massaged, needs to be revised, needs to be amended. There's been a passage of time. So there's nothing hard and firm about this. If the body wants to entertain
That's not the question. My question is, the governor heard the oversight hearing with a higher amount requested, according to them. A bill came down with a lower amount, and now we're going flip-flopping again and saying that we need to give them a higher amount. And that's where, to me, the confusion lies. And we're just saying we just have to be flexible. I think there should be some rationale behind those moves, down or up. And if you can just explain, again, Daphne, you said this 9.25 million was for the period 2018 to 2023?
Yes.
Okay. And then you're saying that you're going out for RFPs on the long-term leases, but you do not expect that these long-term leases are going to bring you in enough revenue to cover this shortfall? I mean, wasn't that the whole point of the whole flexibility in the long-term leases, because you guys were going to suffer and you want to make flexibility, the maximum flexibility in any law of Guam was given to the airport for those leases, but we can't bring in revenue to cover this shortfall. We have to take it out of the general fund?
Senator, eventually with all the leases that potentially we're going to have, it should give us some funding, but because we are just starting the process, it's not gonna materialize as quick as what we needed to cover our shortfalls at this time.
Senator, if I could just clarify that the authorization that was provided to the authority is a tool to diversify revenues so that we're looking at other ways to support the airport, not just the airline fees. I think we all agree that the airlines are required to fly in here, hopefully at the most feasible rate that they can, so that we can continue to support an industry that drives our economy, which is tourism. The real needle mover on the numbers is really passengers. It's people, enplanements, it's people coming in and out of the airport. And the airport is a function of that, is a part of that whole equation. And I think,
what does that got to do with what I'm asking? I'm asking if the revenue for aviation, the revenue on the leases was supposed to be able to make up for whatever shortfalls the airport would have, or to give the airport additional revenue.
Not
and so
entirely.
I'm just asking, and he said it could in the future, but you're saying something completely different.
That it's a tool to diversify revenue so that hopefully we can lift revenues, right? But I don't think there's a dollar-for-dollar exchange on revenues.
Are you saying you cannot
leases.
use lease revenue to support yourselves?
No, of course we can.
Isn't that what it's for?
And that's what we're doing.
Okay, so do you disagree with what I'm saying?
No. I'm just clarifying that this is also part of what we're going to do. I didn't want, what I'm not trying to represent is that leases will cover the airport's costs.
Well, why not? Because if not, the general fund is going to cover the airport's cost. Or you're going to raise fees, and you're saying we very much should not do that. So which one is it? Why should not the revenues of the land cover the airport's costs versus the general fund cover the airport's costs? This is taxpayers' money that is also needed for very critical things. And so why should we give flexible authority to the airport for leasing of land and then take general fund money to cover the airport as well? I mean, that's what we expected, right? Is that you're going to take that and bring in the maximum revenue. We gave you concession authority. You wanted to, instead of go out on a competitive bid, you wanted to continue your concession authority for 6 more months at the same rate, I think, right? So no additional revenue was brought in. And so I just think we need to take seriously that this is a huge impact on the general fund at a time when we are being pressed for many other needs. So I'm not saying we shouldn't do it, but I'm just saying it shouldn't be flippant that you have all this authority and now we're going to take it from the general fund. So my next question is, I heard the chair of the committee ask, when did the airport know about the shortfall was developing? And you talked about January 26, and then you said pretty much that things really came to a head in March because of the Mideast war, I guess. Is that, Daphne, I'm just trying to confirm. We have been through many crises, and never did the airport have to come and ask for general fund. You guys went through COVID, you guys went through other wars, you've been through the Ukraine crisis. And so what happened in March that really changed everything for the airport in the history of Guam?
No, so just to clarify, I also mentioned earlier that, after COVID, of course, or during COVID, there was a lot of federal aid that was provided. And during the time when there was federal aid provided, of course, I think that kind of went into about FY 2024. In FY 2024, really a lot of the airports across the country or across the nation had already begun to hit pre-pandemic passenger traffic levels, but that just was not the case here in Guam. And also, of course, because of that, the scaling back of federal funds, in fact, the ceasing of the providing of federal funds and us not recovering to the passenger traffic levels that we had hoped we would be, then of course, those contribute to, where we are today. What I did mention, though, to kind of clarify on the FY 2026, we had begun in October, November, December of FY 2026, or in October, November, December 2025, our revenues during that time, or employments, were actually tracking really well. I mean, tracking to perhaps maybe not exactly 1.2, but very close to 1.2, maybe like 1.17, 1.18 million employments if we continue the trend that we were. And when we got into January, and then of course coming into the months subsequent, it became clear that that level was not going to continue. And in fact, what we were seeing was, and I've mentioned this before, is that, although I know there's discussion about how our seats or our number of flights is increasing, but when we compare with prior months, but when we look at and compare the number of seats and the number of flights with the prior year, April, I think, was the first month of this fiscal year that the number of flights were projected to be less than the prior fiscal year. So, that's something that for the beginning part of this fiscal year, we did not see.
So April was the...
Well, we know, or we know ahead of April, slightly ahead of April or slightly ahead of the month, what the projected seats or flights are going to be for the following month. And so, again, that April was the first month that we had realized or had that there was going to be less flights and seats than the prior year. So, of course, less flights and seats means less people, right? And so we knew that from then on, and again, that is kind of the trend. So although, again, we hear, okay, well, there's an increase in flights and seats, but perhaps that's a comparison with the prior month versus the prior year.
So this says page 1 of 3, but it's Exhibit E, where you put out your signatory airline and plane passengers numbers. So you're tracking for 2026 the same as for 2025, correct?
Just about, yes, ma'am.
All right, but that's about 200,000 less than what was budgeted for 2026.
Correct.
Okay. So why are you budgeting for 2027 an increase from what you're tracking for 2026?
Those projections come from the airlines, and we actually had received those. As part of the budget process, we send out a memo or a letter to the airlines requesting for their projections. We receive those, or we expect to receive those in around April. After we received them, and of course coming into the next few months subsequent to receiving them, we actually went back to the airlines and we asked them again, can you confirm that those are really the projections, that those projections are still relevant and they hold? And they have confirmed that those projections are still good. So we're utilizing those actual numbers coming from the airlines.
Okay. So these numbers, 1.1 million budget for 2027, they're a little bit less than what you budgeted, 1.25 million for 2026. and a little bit more than what you budgeted for 2025. Can you just explain, if we went back to 2025 levels, let's say, so we overprojected for 2026, and you go back to 2025, I guess I'm not following why it's such a huge that you can't handle that difference in passengers, the 100,000.
To clarify, actually, the first column is actual 2025, and that 1,050,000 is not the budget, but is the actual. And for FY 2026, we had actually projected about 1.25 or 1.26. So for 2 years in a row, we kept our employments in our projections or our budgets at about the same level. But for, again, this last 2 years, we have not realized those budgeted amounts.
Yes, so I'm saying, but you were able to get through 2025, right? With a enplaned passengers amount of 1,050,458.
Right.
Yeah. Why can't you get through 2026 with the exact same employment number?
Sure. Thank you so much, Senator. So also something that happened back in, I believe, 2019 was we did some debt restructuring. And that debt restructuring allowed for us to reduce our debt service, our annual debt service. So currently our annual debt service is $18.6 million. And in the last year, in FY 2025, our actual debt service was $12 million, or a little bit over $12 million. And that's because we had done a defeasance of $3 million in FY 25, and we did a standalone tender that also helped to reduce our annual debt. So we, over the last few years, have been doing our best to utilize these various tools, of course, and of course the legislature, those are, with regards to the standalone tender, that's a legislature authorized transaction. But we have actually worked to try to figure out how we can not pass on the rates and still continue to meet our ratios. So really, our debt service has shot up significantly. Again, there was a point where the debt service was, I think, $7 million, and then I believe $8 million, then $11 million. But of course, now that it's going back to what it should have been, because again, we had taken some of our debt service and we deferred it to later years, but now we're coming to the point where we're at the levels, original levels, and so that's really the driver for, a lot of the challenges that we're facing with regards to that cash.
All right, and the how much were you trying to raise by increasing the fees? 8.4 million or more?
I apologize. Could you clarify which section you're looking at?
None. Just overall, when you proposed to the airlines to increase all their fees.
The budget?
Yeah.
For 2027?
Yes.
So
were you trying to raise 8.4 million in additional revenue or more than that?
So the budget for FY 2027 actually proposes to cover our expenses, and the level of our expenses in this budget is about 60 million, which is what Speaker Blas had spoken to earlier. But again, we were able to find some savings. In addition,
but how much more than 2026? What was the raise, the increase?
The increase is
in fees.
In fees, so there are rates. So
overall, yeah.
So the CPE, we had the current year FY 2026 CPE, or cost per enplane pax, is $34.99. That was what was budgeted. That's what we're utilizing, and you can see that in the second to the last column on that.
Okay, let me just. I'm not understanding that. I just want to go back. So your budget for 2026 was 57 million. Your budget for 27 is 60 million. That's only $3 million increase.
Right.
But you say you need 8.4 million from us, or you're going to increase the fees for the airplane. And I'm asking you, how much were you going to increase their fees? Because if it was only 3 million, we can cover that. If it's 8.4 million, why are we covering more? And why are you, or it looks to me like it's even more than that you're trying to get from the airlines.
That's actually a great question, Senator Chalahi. So what I want to point you to is the budget for 2026. So instead of looking and trying to compare budget 2026 to budget 2027, it's really trying to look at budget 2026 perhaps against actual 2026. And we did, after our oversight hearing back in June 30, provide a letter to the legislature where we had advised that we're estimating a revenue shortfall of between $10.3 million to $12.5 million. And, you know, of course, that is, so we're projecting a revenue shortfall, but we did come in below budget in our expenses, so that's why we're not asking for the full amount for the, or that's why we don't maybe need the full amount for the defeasance. And again...
Okay, just a minute.
Sure.
Are you asking us not to look at this on page 1 of 1 on Exhibit D? This is your budgets, right?
Right.
So you got 55 actual for 2026. You had projected 57, so that's $2 million short. But you're saying
Yes,
now you're $10 million short, and that's why I'm
perhaps
asking.
you can look to page 3 of 3, because so when we're talking about, so that particular page 1 of 3, is really only the signatory airline rates and fees.
Okay.
But what I'm talking about is not just the shortfall in that, I'm talking about the overall revenue shortfall.
Okay. All right. So what explains this jump from 78 million to 92 million in your budget? Why do you need so much more money this year? And is that the 18 million in extra bond payments? But you already had to project that in 2026, right?
So that increase of about, 15 million is due to, we had budgeted in this year. So just real quickly, in the budget for 2026, we had budgeted our O&M reserves of $6 million. Hold on just a second. So the difference is really because we're budgeting in 2027 additional funds for our CIP or our cash funded projects, our additional funds to help to fill our O&M reserve. And then we also had an increase in our O&M expenses.
What is that?
Our operation and maintenance expenses.
Yeah, what is the increase?
The increase was $3 million. So as I mentioned to Speaker Blas, or when Speaker Blas has questions earlier, we'd already found $3 million in savings in our expenses. So now we're not expecting our expenses to be, it's like status quo budget, and we're still actually looking to find additional cuts in our budget, or in the FY27 budget, to bring it below 57 million. So the difference is due to, in FY26, we had budgeted $6 million for our O&M reserve, but this year we're budgeting close to 12, so that's $6 million. We also budgeted last year for our cash funded projects $5 million, but this year we're projecting $9 million because we have some additional large projects that are going to be finished. And so that is $10 million. And then we actually also had an additional $3 million in our expenses, so that's about 13. So that's about the difference. And that's why, in terms of the budget for FY26, you see that increase.
All right. And then from 25 to 2026, the numbers are they actually went down, or no, they didn't. You put in there the 18 million in bond payments, right? Increased bond payments.
Sorry, could you tell me
from
which?
67. I'm still on page 3 of 3.
Okay.
67 million to 78 million. Mm-hmm. That increased because of the 18 million bond payments, or other things.
No. So the actual estimate column.
I'm 2025. 69 million to 2026, 78 million.
Okay, so your question is, what's the difference between?
Yeah, why did that increase so much in 1 year? Well, it was projected to increase, but the actuals are less.
The first column, to clarify, the first column is actually our actual 2025.
Yes.
Not our budgeted 2025.
Oh, okay. All right, so So you want the airlines fees to be raised so that you can cover your capital improvement projects, $9 million, your $6 million to make your bond reserve correct, and $3 million in additional expenses that you are incurring.
To clarify on the, it's $9 million in our
CIP.
and it's over $11 million, I think almost $12 million to fill our O&M reserve, and then $3 million in increases in expenses. What I was referring to earlier in the O&M reserve is the difference between what we had budgeted last year versus what we had budgeted this year, which is what's causing that delta between the two last columns.
So 15 million, you don't think after your RFP is done and your negotiations are completed that you'll be able to recoup 15 million?
Well, we need to realize these, again, we need to realize some of this new money or revenues in this fiscal year. And we only have a couple of months left in this fiscal year.
What is I thought I heard that they're reviewing now the submissions. Is that correct? They've responded to the RFP and they're in review?
Right, so we have an active procurement at this time,
Okay,
but
so
again.
that should be done within less than 30 days, right? Could be done in days.
That's something, again, that's an active procurement, so that's something we really can't speak on.
Well, I hope it's not going to be like Simon Sanchez where we take forever and ever because, again, we're using general fund money here. And especially if you guys are in need, then I would think that would be urgent. My concern, I guess, is that you're already in great need. You're not able to cover it with your other revenue. You're saying you might not be able to cover it even with additional leases. And how are we, this looks to me like a kind of a very bad situation for FY27. And the bill says it's very clear it's for FY26, but you keep saying we need to increase it now for FY27. Do we have to increase that now, or can we do that in that FY27 budget that the governor brought down?
No,
Thank you, Senator. That's, your time is up. Please answer that question.
So to clarify, and even in the transmittal that was provided to Senator GUHNS after the oversight hearing last, is that we need to have an appropriation in this fiscal year. We cannot do a budget for FY 2027 without something actually, again, as Senator Dueñas put it, on paper. So if there is no appropriation done in this fiscal year, then that means that we'll have to just utilize the revenue projections that we have in the budget for FY 27 as what we'll use.
Okay, so you're saying in that letter it was the higher amount than what's in the bill?
No, in the letter that was transmitted on July 14th, it clarified that it was for FY 26, that we really need the appropriation in FY 26. That was what was transmitted in that letter that was provided after the oversight hearing in June 30.
So didn't you just say the opposite? I'm sorry, I'm confused.
No, it needs to be done in FY 26.
Oh.
And the letter stated FY 26.
But what amount did that letter say?
I don't recall what the letter said in the amount said in the letter. I'm not sure. I believe we were just transmitting.
Okay, we don't have that letter. Yeah, if we could get that, because that's after the hearing. Yeah,
absolutely.
And that's not in this file either. All right, thank you, Mr.
Senator.
Chair.
Senator Perez, you're recognized.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the panel for being here. So just to kind of recap, so the debt service is, the mathematical equation is net revenue plus available funds over debt payments for the year, and that's your debt service ratio. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so what you're trying to do is basically add more or reduce the denominator so you can get within the debt service ratio, which right now currently stands at 0.74, which is out of compliance.
Correct.
Okay. So the other way to affect maybe ensuring that we're falling within debt service is to reduce expenses, right? Another way is to reduce expenses, so the net revenue is increased. Available funding, what falls under that category?
Other available monies usually is about 25% of our debts, our annual debt service. But what we have currently in our bank account for that particular fund is about $1 million.
Sorry, can you say that again? So within that equation itself, under the available funds, what qualifies as available funds other than net revenue?
So it's net revenues plus it's called other available monies.
Yes.
And that other available monies usually is 25% of the debt service amount, the annual debt service amount.
Okay, so if it's 18.6 million,
then 25% of that
is...
However, we currently have in that particular account $1 million, which is why what we're doing is we're utilizing our net revenues are showing currently at 12.71 million. Our other available monies is showing at 1 million. And if you divide that by our annual debt service of 18.64 million, that yields 0.74.
Okay. So I just want to go over the ways we can decrease, I guess, expenses. And so one of the things in the bill, it talks about you want to use $9.2 million to pay prior year obligations. And so in looking at your, so prior obligations, is that contractual, or what is that? Is that payment of personnel costs? What is the prior obligations here?
Would you please?
In the bill itself. So in the bill, it states that 9.2, roughly 9.2, to pay for prior obligations.
Oh, that refers to, if you're referring to the bill, I believe it refers to the $9.25 million that's due to the airport in prior year aviation fuel tax.
Okay, just to cover for the fuel tax.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, so then let's talk about the expenses. And so I'm looking over some documents, the FY 25 and 24 contractual services, and some have expired. So let's take a look at the 25. So in it, I'm just looking at the biggest cost. You have $2.2 million for Airport Master Plan update, which has expired already. Do you have any updated listing for contractual services for 26? And if you can provide the listing to the body.
Sure, we could provide that, ma'am.
Yeah, so in looking at the documentation, I believe in, so I'm going back and forth between your presentation. Yeah, so here it states that roughly half goes to contractual services and half goes to personnel, and then a small portion goes to materials and supplies and equipment. And so I know you stated earlier that some of these, I think, projects or contractual obligations will be phasing out, is that correct?
I don't recall saying that. What I recall saying is that we found an additional $3 million in savings in our expenses. But generally, if you're looking at this graph that shows, it's a pie chart that shows 48% of our budget is for personnel, 47% is for contractual. This will be updated after we make our adjustments to the expense budget, but also generally our personnel and our personnel expense and our contractual expenses run about that percentage anyway.
Okay, and you don't foresee any savings with the contractual?
Well, with regards to savings, again, as I mentioned, what we have done for FY 2026 is we've done a retention on our budget. And of course, we have worked to reduce, to make sure that we keep reduce our power bill. And we've also worked to address, again, current issues or challenges by, again, not hiring, even though we have budgeted for certain vacancies. So we've been able to save from retention about $600,000. From not hiring to the level that we are needing, we've been able to save over $1 million. And then, of course, we've also been able to save in power, and we're still continuing to look at other areas to make cuts in. In fact, we've also shuttered our West Concourse which is gates 8 to 4 or 4 to 8. And so then, not having passengers go there, not having flights go out of there, we're able to reduce our power consumption, reduce our cleaning contract, and then also, probably a little bit of water as well. So those are things that we're looking at, and we're trying to identify additional areas to be more efficient.
Okay, I noticed there's a continuous emergency procurement for the baggage conveyance system. Has the airport looked at using a different source selection method to get better value?
As I understand it, and here I'll have the manager.
Yeah, Senator, that's not a continuous emergency. That was awarded to a contractor.
Okay, because so this has changed from 25 then, FY25?
Yes, definitely.
Okay. What is the cost now? Annual cost?
I would have to get back to you on the annual cost for baggage handling.
Yeah. Did you guys get any savings from this, from the new procurement?
Again, I'll have to get back to you on that.
Okay. Okay, so the other thing is looking at others' jurisdictions. So we know that geopolitically, the oil costs are increasing. Is it $100 a barrel now? I forget what the cost is. And so that's going to have a ripple effect on the airline industry for sure. And have you looked at other jurisdictions to see what are they doing to, I guess, perhaps plan for this or address this downturn?
Can you just clarify that question?
Yeah, so I'm assuming that we're not the only airport that's being affected by the oil prices. And I'm just wondering, have you looked at other airports to see what are they doing to address possible downturn in their industries?
Well, in some of the airports that are, especially in the Asia-Pacific regions, some airports are when an airline comes in to their location, they are not refueling that aircraft there. They're making sure that when the aircraft comes in, that aircraft has enough fuel to get back to their destinations. So that's some of these airports that are happening in the region, like for example in Thailand or Philippines almost went to that process, but they didn't get there. Thailand and Vietnam they're not refueling those airlines when they're coming into their airports. So that's one of the ways that they were not worried about the fuel that they need to put in.
But in regards to the airports themselves, is that a reduction in their revenues? So what are they doing to address any drops in revenues?
I don't know that. I have to get back to you because I don't know that question. As far as that, or what are they doing versus what we are doing?
Or what are they doing that we can learn from? So if they're doing something that can help reduce costs, increase revenues perhaps, because we're all experiencing the same impacts, I'm sure.
I would say that they are not as suffering as much as we are as far as the CPE, as far as the employments that are coming in. For example, Thailand is had an increase in as far as the passenger arrivals there versus us in CNMI. We are still suffering, and a lot of it has to do not only for the fuel, but also the U.S. dollar to their currency. So that has a lot to do with that.
Okay, so what about Hawaii? Have you looked at Hawaii?
I won't. I don't have that figure or that comparison, ma'am.
Okay, yeah, that's important to see what other people are doing. Maybe there's something there that we can use.
Senator Perez, though, just to clarify also, I mean, with regards to Hawaii, the visitor base there is quite different from ours. Of course, there are direct flights from the continental United States to Hawaii that, of course, are a lot less expensive than coming to Guam. So their customer base is quite different than ours. But I can appreciate, your recommendation.
Okay. So do we get any revenues from layovers? Let's say they stop here. Is there any revenues from that?
Layovers or transit passengers,
Yeah,
that
they
is
don't get
counted,
off. They
that's
don't get
counted
off.
as a CPE.
Oh, it's part of the CP?
Yes, that's
Okay.
a employment.
So even though they don't deplane?
That's right. Matter of fact, layovers or transits, they're able to stay in the concourse area and shop and hopefully eat and do that kind of stuff. So yes, that's counted.
Okay. And do we get a lot of that?
Yes, we do. We do get transits. I don't know the amount, but there is I'm pretty sure we have the figures for that, and we can get that to you.
Okay, thank you. And then I'm just looking at the public auditor's report. It goes back to 2024, I believe. And so I think since 2023, that's actual budget. So they have the actual, it has the actual 2023, the actual 2024 compared to its budget, and the budget 2025. And then with your presentation, you have a continuation of that data. And so it looks to me like if you look at the revenues, so if you look at the total revenues between the budget and estimated, there's a trend in regards to overestimating what the revenues are. So between 2024, the actual was about 66 million when the budget was 75. In 2025, the budget was 79. The actual is 69. So it's overestimating. And then now in 2026, the actual is 67 or 68. And now the budget is 78. What do you attribute to the overestimation?
Well, as we mentioned earlier, we do really base our projections on airline projections, number one. But really in the climate we are in, Senator Perez, just to share with you, it is really challenging to try to determine what level of enplanements or passenger traffic we're going to be at. I believe that our initial master plan that was done had projected that we would be fully recovered perhaps by around 2029. But where we are now is the first time that we had exceeded 1 million in plane packs was, I believe, FY 2024. And then, FY 2025, we were hopeful that after we had exceeded, because in FY 2023, we had about 850,000 enplanements. In FY 2024, we had a little bit over 1 million enplanements. Because we kind of saw that we're seeing that increase, of course, and as we looked at the projections for FY the next coming fiscal years, we had projected, again, in hindsight, a little bit high, but really, it's unfortunate, but it is really, it's challenging to do those projections. We do the best we can, but, again, now we're seeing or realizing the differences, and it's resulting in this shortfall.
Yeah, I mean, perhaps, data scientists would be good in, figuring this out. I think we need mathematicians on board to kind of really fine-tune these projections because it really has an impact, obviously, when it comes to having to, make sure that the revenues are sufficient. So you were talking about, you're breaking down between 2026 budget and 2027 budget, and you broke it down between reserves, CIPs, O&M, wait, maybe I'm confused, increase in O&M. Was it similar for those previous years? I mean, what has anything changed as far as, I guess I would have to look at each category, but was the years treated differently or relatively the same when it comes to O&M, CIPs?
Well, so with regards to O&M, as I mentioned, actually for 2 years in a row, we had a status quo budget in terms of our operation and maintenance expense. For 2 years in a row, we kept it at $57 million. That was FY26 and FY25. We've been able to come below those levels, and of course, that's through various measures that we've undertaken. That's on the expense level. And if you wanted, in terms of the difference, so we in FY26 had budgeted for $6 million in O&M reserves. We budgeted, I believe, $5 million in, or $4 million, or $4 to $5 million in our, I believe $5 million in our cash funded projects. And so when our revenues were not coming in to the level that we need them to, then of course that causes a challenge. But when you ask, well, what is the difference? Yes, the difference is that the O&M reserve, because we were not able to fill it with the amount of revenues that we had the prior year, then now we're trying to fill it with not just this year's shortfall, but also with perhaps an accumulation. And with regards to our CIP, we do just happen to have some additional kind of large projects that are going to be finished in 2027 fiscal year. And so that's why our projection had increased, or that's why we increased the level of our cash funded projects that's included in the budget.
Okay, and then in discussing it with you, your goal is to have 25% in reserves, right, for the O&M expenses?
Correct. So that is required that we have 25% in our reserves.
Oh, it's required.
That's why we are working to budget.
Okay, required by bond?
It's part of, yes.
Okay. So how much square footage do you have available for leasing within the airport?
I would have to get back to you on that, ma'am. I don't have that number off the top of my head.
Are you talking inside the facility or outside the?
Inside the facility.
Senator Perez, we have 784,334 square feet of usable space.
Okay.
And 85% is available.
You said 85% is available?
100, oh, here, do you want?
Senator, about 85% of that amount is vacant, but on the public side, 100% is leased already. So it's all on the non-public area where our operations are.
Okay, so the non-public areas, who can lease those areas? Is it airlines? Is that what you're saying?
Primarily airlines, yes.
Okay, so it has to be aeronautical.
Yeah.
Okay, so going back to this appropriation, so can you explain again how this, so if I understood correctly, Daphne, this appropriation will help to address, bring us within the debt service compliance. Can you explain what would the CPE be, again, for this amount? So right now you have it at $55.06, and without the appropriation, is that correct?
Yes, without the appropriation, but because we were able to find $3 million in savings and expenses, then that actually is now at 52, but we're still working to find additional savings, so that can actually go down. We're expecting to reduce it further. But of course, we can only reduce so much. The airport is, we need to be able to operate, and so again, we're looking at additional areas to cut. But right now we're at 52 CPE.
So what factors would help bring it down further? What would be needed to bring it down to, let's say, I guess I just need to think bigger picture about the letters that the airline sent, right? And so they were responding to increases. And so what would those increases, I guess, they add to this $55 CPE? Does it amount to this $55 CPE? Maybe if you can just clarify that for me.
Oh, okay.
So, Senator, it's, if we were to be given, for every $1 million that we're given, it's $1 off the CPE.
Every $1 million?
Yes.
If you were given additional or made additional.
That's right.
Or saved additional $1 million.
Right, for every savings or whatever the case may be, if we were saving, and we went from 55 down to 52, so we were able to try and squeeze out $3 million more in savings, so that brought it down to 52. So for every $1 million that we were able to shave off, it's $1 off the CPE.
And so this appropriation, does it have an effect on that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so which one? Is it the 8.4, the 9.2, or both?
Well, the 9.2 is the aviation fuel tax, and that's a tax that has already been identified as revenue.
So it won't affect the CPE?
So to clarify, we had already recorded that as revenue, so for FY 2026, we can't record it as revenue again in the numerator for the debt service coverage ratio.
So it's only the 8.4 then that would bring it down?
For FY 2026, yes.
It would have an effect on the CPE.
But for, however, that money, though, can be put into our O&M reserve. And if you recall, I mentioned that we were including in our FY27 budget approximately $12 million to fill our O&M reserve. So then that would mean that $9 million would help to fund a portion of what we had built into our budget. And that $9 million then would be correspondingly a $9 reduction in CPE for FY27. So the $8 million, and actually Director Carlson corrected me earlier, it could potentially be $8.8 million, but the $8.8 million needs to be set aside for the defeasance, and then the remaining, but it has to be the AFT, is going to be utilized to help fill the O&M reserve account.
Okay, just for simplicity. So what would bring it down to, so in addition to your savings of $3 million, this 9.2 would bring it down as well?
So if we were to say that if we have 17.7 and just say 9 of it is going to be going to a defeasance in this year, then we'd have 8.7 left, right? And just let's call it 9. So if we're at 52 minus 9 is going to be 43. So that this particular appropriation, just the appropriation itself, will help us so that, number one, we can address the issue of FY26 through this funding of a defeasance, and number two, of course, that we can help reduce our CPE, but that reduction would only be to approximately $43.
So the letters by the airlines, what were they responding to as far as fee increases? And is it incorporated into the budget?
So the budget itself, this is what they were actually referring to in their letters.
Okay,
the
so-
document you have in front of you.
Okay, so some of the fees, departure fees, those are all increased, right? Departure, common use, arrival, it looks like they're all increased.
Right, and so how it works, so the CPE is not actually the rate. The CPE, or the cost per employment, it's a metric that's related to the rate. If you take the sum of all of the revenues, right, that's generated, you take the sum of all those revenues and you divide it by the employments, then you get a CPE.
Gotcha.
The CPE is a metric that's used by airports, actually, and also airlines especially, to determine what the costs are, and also to determine whether their rates are reasonable for airlines to come into or to fly into. But the CPE is not actually the rate, but it's an indicator of a rate, and in fact, it is directly related to the rate. So when the rates go up, the CPE goes up. When the rates go down, the CPE goes down.
Yeah, thank you, gotcha. So this budget for 2027, 92 million. Oh, that's revenues. And your expenses are pretty steady at 50, 56, you said?
So we're currently at 57, but we're working to try to reduce that.
Okay, I think I need to study this a little bit more before I have more questions, but I think, yeah, that's my questions for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Parkinson, you're recognized.
I am generally in favor of supporting your request. However, I think we really need to have a long heart-to-heart look as a body, as an agency, on the underlying problems that have led us to this extraordinary request. You know, someone was asking, I forget who it was, what happened in March that everything kind of changed? Well, World War III kind of started in March, you know? Whereas these massive war that's happening right now in Iran that is affecting everything all over the world, and there is no foreseeable end in sight. So for me, my concern is, like, I have no problem, you know, going to the well here and supporting you, but the question is, what happens next year? What happens next year if this war continues to go on, if things continue to get worse? I would consider that maybe you folks get ahead of this, that even if we do grant this funding, that you also still raise passenger fees or whatever fees you need to make, so that if this problem continues to build upon itself, let's start getting proactive. Let's not pretend that this problem on the global scale is going to go away anytime soon. Let's pretend that this problem is going to go on for 5 years. Are the needs that we're funding now still enough? Are the needs we're going to be funding tomorrow still enough? Because I don't foresee any of this stuff ending anytime soon. And I foresee that we're probably going to be back here having the same exact conversation for the exact same reason. And it's going to be through no fault of our own. You know, we didn't start this war. We're going to be recipients of the problems of it. But that's something we're just going to have to deal with. And I agree with the rationale that the airport is an important public service and jewel of the island that we cannot let collapse. And if that means we got to fund it from the general fund, so be it. Let's do it. You know, let's weather the storm. But then you also need to have an honest conversation about how long is this storm going to last. Is this storm going to last 1 budget season, 2 budget seasons, 3 budget seasons, 4 budget seasons? How long do we have to keep going back to the general fund? Is this going to be something we do for the foreseeable future, or is this going to be a one-off? These are serious questions we need to ask ourselves because I don't see things getting better in the next 5 years. So maybe even if you do get this funding, consider raising revenues in other ways. Can break glass A and glass B. If this emergency is dire enough, let's use the tools that we have at our disposal to stop the bleeding now. Because the longer we wait, the longer we let that open wound continue to gush, the harder it is to get all that blood back in the body. And so I support your request, and I don't really have any questions for you folks except how long does this last? Maybe you can answer. Like, is this going to be something that you foresee we're going to have to come back to in another year and ask for more appropriations?
We're hoping not to, but we've got to be optimistic, right, about it. But I can't speak on geopolitical scenarios that are going on right now. It doesn't look like it's going to happen or it's going to end anytime soon.
Yeah, if things continue to suck, are we going to have to do this again next year?
I'm being optimistic, and it's not.
But it is a possibility that we could have to do this next year if this doesn't work out and things don't improve.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And
or even if we get another super typhoon, right, that shuts us down.
We get another super typhoon, right. We get COVID-27, whatever, right? There could be a million things that come that affect our way of life here. And so we need to ask ourselves, like, what the plan is if it continues to get worse. I'm with you. I hope that things work out optimistically and things work out well, but we need to be prepared for the plan if things do not improve. Otherwise, we're just going to be continually reactive to this problem instead of getting ahead of it and finding a long-term way to staunch this bleeding and not have to have this these grill sessions every time you guys need some money. We need to have a long-term plan to survive the next decade of turmoil that is going on all over the world. So please give those things some thought, because it does need to be part of the discourse. You know, I appreciate you hoping to be optimistic that this is a one-time thing, but in my experience, these things are never a one-time thing. You know, it's never as good as advertised. So with that, Mr. Chair, I yield the rest of my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Montanani, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I too want a little more clarity with what we're discussing today, because I feel like we're talking about kind of two different things, but really one. So just starting from last year, May, June, the legislature passed legislation, enacted into law to give the airport tools to help with revenue opportunities through the extended leases, whether it was through the concessionaire or the land leases. That was last year, May, June, July. By October, November, December, the numbers started to look optimistic in terms of arrivals that were coming to Guam, so it looked promising. January, that's when the rules, policies were approved for the extended leases. Again, you were hopeful, and the RFPs started to go out, and they're still out. By March, April, that's when you realize that we're seeing less flights, less passengers, the war in Iran. By June 30th, there was the oversight hearing that was held here at the legislature when it was brought to the legislature, the committee's attention, that the airport was experiencing financial stress. That you would need at least $26 million, 17 for the current fiscal year, and another 9 for fiscal year 27. Is that correct?
It was 17, ma'am, but the 9 was to pay back the debt for the aviation fuel tax.
For the current fiscal year?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Right, so then on July 15th, we've got the bill that's before us, and that is the $17 million, the 9 for the fuel tax arrearages, and the 8 that you need for your operations. July 31st, that was last week, Friday, the airport met with the airlines to present their budget for fiscal year 2027, which includes all of these rate increases, right? And so then on Monday, I was invited to a meeting here by the committee chair with oversight over the airport in a meeting with the airlines. And basically what you read, Daphne, in the letters is what they relayed to us. And they did have a few words about the Guam Visitors Bureau and their efforts to raise the tourism and arrival numbers, which I think I don't need to repeat. I think the chair kind of summed it up in his statement. But here we are today, and again, we are reviewing the governor's bill on what you need to get you through the remainder of this fiscal year, the $17 million. And we're also looking at your proposal for fiscal year 27, right? And of which you're saying that you're looking at the proposed budget at $60.2 million, which is about $3 million more than the current fiscal year, but you mentioned that you could possibly reduce it by $3 million.
We already have.
You already have to $57 million. Okay, so what have you done in the current fiscal year, knowing that you were experiencing this financial shortfall as early as, I think you said March, April? What kind of cuts have you done? Has the airport done?
Well, what we've done is we've actually implemented a retention, meaning that we don't release the full budget for each of the divisions, and we have not released what we've held. Of course, we fully fund salaries and wages, and we fully fund our contracts, but anything outside of that we have not funded, and so we've saved from that about $600,000. We've also not been hiring to the level, of course, that we had budgeted, and we've, in fact, been very slow on, trying to hire because we want to make sure, or because we're, again, in the current situation that we are. And in terms of savings in our salaries and wages, we've actually has achieved savings of over $1 million just in salaries and wages in this fiscal year. So we've also worked on addressing our power bill and making sure that we're taking measures to reduce our power consumption. And have actually in the last few years deferred a lot of our maintenance and expenses, which, although it saves on cash currently, it may be costly in the future. But to go back to it, though, even though, again, in this fiscal year, we started out very strong, and then we noticed in January that kind of turn. Even back in 2 years ago, we had undertaken in 2024 fiscal year, we began the process of doing a debt restructuring. We did a standalone tender at that time that would help us to, because of course a large piece of what we have to pass on is our debt service, or the amount of our debt. And when we knew that our debt was going to be increased, then what we did was we worked to try to make sure that that could be decreased through these transactions so that we wouldn't have to pass that on. We started that in 2024, but we ended up realizing the savings in our debt service in 2025, and so that's why our debt service in 2025 wasn't $18.6 million. It was only a little bit over $12 million. But again, now we're coming to this point where our debt service is, again, $18.6 million in FY 2026, and working to address that. We did actually build into our budget a defeasance of $3 million. However, we didn't realize that, the level that we were going to need in terms of a defeasance was going to be the level that we are today.
So $600,000 is how much you were able to save? Or?
In terms of just, and actually that's just from retention. That's not for all of the other, again, deferrals that we have. We have a long list of projects that we have actually kind of pushed because we, again, recognize that there's challenges financially.
Okay. So the $3 million in savings, what was that from? For fiscal year 27?
For fiscal year 27, what we did was initially, and I will have to go back to exactly the details, but in terms of personnel, we had funded our vacancies at 15% in the initial budget. And what we did was we actually have worked to actually not fund vacancies. And so at least, and what we have identified, I have to take it back. We did identify like certain critical positions that have not been funded and which we need, but those are few. But the remainder of the vacancies we have not funded. And so that's something that that's an area we found savings. We also looked to, just again, other areas, looking back in the prior years as to where we were with our expenses and trying to match what we did in the prior year. That's really, again, what we're doing. But in FY27, we want to make sure that we're working with our division heads and we're not arbitrarily just, reducing their budgets without their input. So we've given them targets to meet in terms of their expenses for FY27. And we've asked for our division heads to come back to us and tell us where they believe that they can make those cuts to meet those targets. And that's what we're working on with regards to our FY27 budget.
Some of those savings also, Senators, is from Gate 8 to Gate 4, where we shuttered it up so we don't have to pay power bill for that area, contracting cleaning services for that area and stuff. So I don't have the exact amount of savings that's going to be there, but it's definitely significant to reduce some of our expenses.
Does that $3 million in savings, can that be counted toward the $9.2 million you need for FY27 to stave off all of these rate increases?
So already, of course, the first version of the budget that you saw has a CPE of $55.06, and you can find that in the FY27 budget in the section that I don't know if you see a shaded section or a section that's blue, and so you'll see 5506. So for every $1 million that we're able to get appropriated, then that helps to reduce the CPE by $1. So if we start with 55 and we reduce our expenses by $3 million, so that's 52, and then further to that, then the appropriation that's left, and I think we're talking about $9 million. So 52 minus the 9 that would be left over after the defeasance, that would help bring us down to 43. That would be what we estimate the CPE to be with the current level of appropriation in this bill.
And again, these rate increases are for fiscal year 2027. The $17 million that we would be, if approved, it's not going to, it doesn't affect the rate increases. Those are, unless we appropriate and approve, the 9.2.
So the $17.65 million as it stands in the budget, if we could think of it in two pieces. So of the 17.65, we're going to be utilizing, and again, to go back to it, I know Director Carlson had mentioned, we really need 8.8 for our defeasance. So we may need, of the 17.65, a minimum of an additional $400,000 to make sure that that defeasance can be done. But 17.65, then you take out the 8 million or 8.8, 9 million maybe, and then what's left over is going to be what's going to be addressing FY27. So we need, how it works is, that in terms of debt service coverage ratio, there's basically 3 components, or well, maybe 4. So there's revenues, there's expenses, there's other available monies, and then there's our debt service, or our annual debt service payment. Number 1 is our revenues. Now, because we'd already recorded the $9.2 million in our revenues in prior years, the $9.2 million in aviation fuel tax, we cannot add, when we receive the money, we cannot add that to our revenues again because we've already used it when we recorded it as revenue. It was a receivable. Even if we didn't receive it, we recorded it as revenue already. So that was recorded as revenue and used in our debt service calculation for prior years. So that $9 million cannot be used in that calculation, right? The leftover, which we'll just call 8 or $8 million, just for simplicity's sake. That $8 million or $8.8 million is going to be used for defeasance. So the defeasance would impact the denominator, which is the annual debt service. Currently, our annual debt service is $18.6 million. Defeasing bonds basically means we retire them. We retire them. They won't exist anymore. We pay them off so that they don't exist anymore in our outstanding bond balance. So when we defease that, we can actually take that amount out of the denominator. So if you could just imagine, and I'll just for simplicity's sake say we need 8.8, but our annual is 16.8, so then we would be able to reduce, excuse me, it's 18.6. So if it's 18.6 minus 8, so then that would mean that we would have, as a denominator, 10 million instead of 18 million. And that helps, of course, when the denominator is smaller. So as an example, just 100 divided by 10, right? If we keep 100 stable or consistent, that 100 by 10 divided by 10 is 10. But if we reduce that denominator and instead make it 5, 100 divided by 5 is 20, right? So as that denominator becomes smaller, the ratio becomes higher. And so that's, again, how we're able to impact in FY26 our debt service coverage ratio so we can meet what's required. So this money, 17.65, if you could think about it, is broken up into two pieces. One portion of it that's going to be used for defeasance to impact FY 2026. The other portion, which is the prior year AFT, which is going to be used to impact our FY 2027 rates. Why the FY 2027 rates can be impacted and not FY 26, right? That's a good question. So the FY 2026 rates, so the 9.25 that we've already recorded as revenue, we can use to fill our O&M reserve. And that O&M reserve, we had already tried to fill last year, weren't able to fill it. So that, because that is built in our FY 2027 budget, and we'll have that money, then we can actually reduce the need to bill our O&M reserve for that, and can therefore reduce the CPE using that money. I know it's a little bit complicated, but basically if you think about it, it's in two pieces. One piece is the defeasance. It's going to help us with FY 2026. The other piece is going to be the 9.25, which is going to help us with our FY 2027 rates to be able to help us to reduce those rates. Correspondingly, again, it's about $1 million for every, a dollar for every $1 million.
So do you need the additional 9.2 to take it to 26?
Right. So if we wish to, so as I mentioned, so if you take the 17.7, yes, right. we would need it in order to be able to maintain our current level of rates. And how you would calculate that is, again, if we start with 55 CPE, we reduce by 3 to get 52, and then for simplicity's sake, we say we have 9 million left of the 17.65, right? 52 minus 9 would bring us to about 43. So that's really, again, where we would be in terms of a CPE with this particular appropriation. And so in order to get down to the level we are today, which is $34.99, right, from 43 to $34.99, then there's that additional monies that would be needed in order to get there, which is $8 million.
Thank you, Daphne. I did want to also follow up. I know it was asked before by a previous speaker regarding how in the current budget law there is language in there for the airport to pay or for the governor to use her transfer authority to address these fuel tax arrearages. And I believe, Mr. Carlson, you mentioned that there's no money to do that?
It's an authorization with no appropriation, so we'd have to scour the executive branch agencies for funds that would be available to commingle and then come up with $9 million, and we don't have that kind of money.
And I know I'm still kind of new to this, but I know during the budget sessions there was discussion that there was $18 million in lapses. Could that not have been used?
I also said, Senator, that if, out of good governance, that maybe OFB should and BBMR should sit down so we can rekindle how we're doing the projection for lapses, and we're far off between OFB. So I have no issues getting together with OFB, letting them see how we ascertain any lapses. And you know, I know they use the CRER, and when they get the CRER, they use straight line. That's not really an appropriate methodology, but for the future, I have no problems with getting together with them so that when we come together, we have a more concerted view on what the lapses could potentially be and not be so far apart.
Thank you. Thank you, Lester, for that explanation. And congratulations, by the way, on your award. And thank you to the airport. Those are all the questions I have right now. But I will just say this, because during the meeting with the airlines and their concerns about these rate increases in the proposed fiscal year 27 budget for the airport, one thing that it was relayed to the airlines is that we are very concerned about the situation at the airport, but at the same time, we also have to keep in mind the priorities of the government and our people, that being, of course, healthcare, public safety, and education, and how we prioritize appropriating that money. So thank you, Mr. Chair. And
thank you, Senator Montanani. Senator Borja, you have any questions for the panel?
No, Mr. Chair. I mean, after all the senators before me, most of the stuff, I will say though, like, starting with Speaker, and then I thought I had a good understanding, and then as we went through the other senators, I got a little bit confused just because where some of the questions are going. But I at least understand that there's a need based on obviously the situation with tourism and things going on around the world, which is why you're here. And I'm going to assume that at least based on the information provided, we understand the projected revenues and obviously where we want it to be. You guys have done what you needed to do to try and save some money, right? Looking at the operations and where you can cut costs. And of course, considering the levers that we gave you guys over the last year to generate revenue, you guys have done that. So I think, like, as we checked all the boxes through a lot of the questions, I think I don't think there's any doubt that we want to help and are going to help. And so I don't really have any questions besides, thank you for coming here, and congratulations, Mr. Lester Carlson, and I look forward to hopefully there's not that many questions. There's a lot of questions ready, so I'm saying that because I'm tired, and I hope that we can finish this soon. I'm saying that because I don't have any questions, but I'm like, let's wrap this up because I feel sorry for the staff too. But thank you for being here and answering the questions from the previous senators so that I have a good understanding of why we're here and what we need to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Borja. Ranking Member Muñoz-Barnes, any questions for the panel?
Yes, I do. Yeah. Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Speaker. I do have a couple of questions, and give me a second here. No. Thank you. As I was hearing the questions and answers that were going on in reference to the funding needed for the airport, I was just thinking outside the box as you spoke about the revenue generating initiative, including the thorough non-aeronautical opportunities. And one of the first questions I wanted to ask are, what are some of the real short-term revenue generating initiatives that are seriously being looked into, just so that some of these immediate cash flows are going into the airport?
Well, with regards to some short-term, of course, we do have some properties, like, for example, what we used to call the old Napa building. There are also some properties that are available, and as I mentioned earlier this morning, that we do have interest from another auto vehicle company to also rent some space in our area. But there are some leasable spaces as well, even the airport property, and perhaps Mr. Santos can share, but our airport property, a lot of times people think it's just right there at the airport, but of course we span also, we go into TYPHOON, right, where we do have the United hangar, where we have the APA hangar, where we have also that one cargo building that I think that's used for Home Depot. So there's spaces kind of in that area. We also have some space as well, I think, land as well that's available kind of toward Conwood in that area. So again, a lot of people don't realize the footprint of the airport and how vast and what a vast amount of property or land that we have to lease.
Yeah. Would you like to add to that, Mr. Frank?
As mentioned earlier, they have some short-term leases, like the auto dealerships, that we can generate equipment revenue without too much capital expenditures on the part of either the lessee or the airport. So there's no capital expenditure. They park on the grass. At the same time, there's a reduction in expenses because those areas do not need to be maintained or mowed. We're looking at inside the terminal, because even the concessions require time for a transition, is how can we work with the current, say, the food and beverage people to transition themselves so that if a new operator comes in, that it's completely closed off for construction. So we want to be able to phase that in. During the Defense Forum by Sammy, I was in a panel for the microgrid. Now, the microgrid is not necessarily revenue generation, but it could be, because we're looking at a microgrid process for the entire, all the airport properties, which is around 31 to 34 megawatts. So that, in a deal with GPA, that could be a source of revenue, but at the same time, it will reduce our power costs, because we're around $6 to $7 million a year right now. The microgrid is for the entire, all airport properties, all facilities, including those that are owned by developers.
I asked this question because I wanted to make sure, as was noted, or you leave no stone unturned, right? We want to, if we're going to look for revenues, we look within ourselves first and see how we can take those resources without having to literally tap into the general general fund. And I've been able to see some of the other airports within even the Asian region, and many other airports have facilities and services like hotels and the shower amenities and lounges and more dining options and more retail spaces inside and outside the security. And I wanted to see if the airport is considering expanding services and retail spaces within the area. I know that we have several floors and a lot of spaces that look like they could be utilized for, even in the different sections, for opportunities for vendors to come in, and I wanted to see if you guys were also looking at that, because first of all, for that, you could bring more employment opportunities, you can bring more revenues into the airport, and then just getting creative to making sure that the opportunities for our residents here, even to tap into providing those kind of retail services or literally food and other amenities that could be provided, even in the little spaces. So have you even looked at all those opportunities?
Senator, those opportunities, and where we could be referring to, currently there's RFPs that are all out so that hopefully those spaces that you're possibly talking about will be filled, hopefully within the short term.
So when you say short term, is it safe to say that a timeline could be within the next year or so? Or
way before that. It's currently, the RFP went out, it was closed, and now they're in the evaluation process.
So we're looking at something sooner than later?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And again, as we look at the airport being the first line of what our tourists and what our visitors see, I think it's important as policymakers that we look at what we can do to assist the airport in the time of needs. And there are a lot of variables and factors that have been equated. We look at the currency rates, we look at the flights, we look at what's being promoted, and even within the Asian region of how those countries are supporting vacation stays within their own countries. So I understand that the struggles are there, and when I was the oversight of the airport, it was like, how can we get creative to bring new opportunities in? But when we're all trying to pull from the same market, how else can we go out there and look at to bring more resources in? So I know my colleague and I have been conversing about what financial opportunities are there, and I'm willing to see how, at least for me, how we can assist the airport in the time of need, but hoping that when things are great, that the opportunity to work back in giving the government would be there. So, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Speaker, thank you very much for the opportunity to ask these couple of questions. Sizos Masi.
Thank you, Ranking Member Muñoz-Barnes. Senator San Agustin, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I was listening to all the questions, and I'm looking at the bill, and I heard it earlier from Lester. The bill says 17 million. You need more, you got to ask. You got in the bill 8.4 to meet your operation and safety needs for your shortfall in 2026. The 9 million is it's a pretty easy answer. How much more did you need other than 8.4? Anybody can answer it up there. You all know the number, so just give me the number.
We're looking at 9 million, Senator.
9 million on top of the 8?
So 8.4 plus the 9 makes it 17.
17 alone just for your shortfall, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. That's a lot. And that's just for 2026?
That will cover 2026 and then to 2027.
Oh, so it'll take care of 26 and go right into 27 without a problem?
It'll reduce the CPE down to the levels today of around $34.99.
And there's no other increase on the aviation fuel tax, right? Arrears, we're good at, it's 9.2?
That's been at 9.25 because since 2023, October of 2023, they've been giving us the aviation fuel tax since October of 2023. So that's from 2018 to September 2023 that was not given to the airport.
2018?
Yes, sir. Aviation fuel tax. That was an arrears from 2018 to 2023.
How did you get in arrears? I mean, why wasn't you given the funds for that? I'm trying to understand that because I know the liquid fuel tax, we waived that, but it's not. I don't believe it's supposed to impact aviation.
Yeah. So the aviation fuel tax in 2018 went from 4 cents to 8 cents.
Okay.
And so that the 4 cents from 2018 to 2023 amounted to 9.25 million.
Okay. You know what I'm really concerned about, because you're autonomous, right, is I'm trying to figure out how I can introduce an amendment that if you're good in 2027, if you make enough money in 27, yeah, I'm hopeful in 27 you're upbeat at the airport, that some of that money comes back to the general fund. You know, you can't just have a free ride. You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying you're not asking for a free ride, but I'm just saying on the numbers game is that from 8 to 17, okay. The 9, that's clearly understood. But I'm just looking at if you are fortunate to get the 17 from this body and you meet what you need, anything above that, it comes back to us, the general fund. Could you commit to that in a statement, just saying that? Yes, you can commit to that, because we don't know who's going to be in charge in next year, you know what I mean? So I'm just saying, if it can be committed, it can be in the bill, and then whoever takes over, you bite the bullet and have a nice day. And the reason why I asked that, because Frank mentioned that, and I think even Daphne mentioned about the solar, the solar, you're going to reduce your park and stuff. You're going to reduce some of your expenses. You're going to generate revenue by the leases and stuff. So there's going to be a point where you're going to start to climb, just from your leases and the reduction in the cost of power and whatever else you do. So it's going to go down, but the money's still going to be there. It's up front. It's not something where you're going to say, can we get some more? No. You're done. You got to work it. The leases got to come in, and all I'm saying is that when you balance out and it starts becoming plus got to come back, so that when you ask again, the body can consider that. But to just give, I don't know. But can you guys make a statement that say you could? I don't know how much you can commit to, but at least whoever takes over understands that you guys made a commitment. If the body makes a commitment to take care of you and into 27, I'm looking at the chairman there, and he's probably like, oh God, here we go. But
Senator,
we need to hear this from you folks.
Perhaps that's something maybe we need to take back to bond counsel and council on because that's considered subordinate debt, and I'm not sure if that's something that we can.
It's what?
It's called subordinate debt.
Yeah, but so, if you're trying to borrow money from a bank, you gotta give some collateral. You know what I mean?
Right.
There's a give and take here. You know where I'm coming from, Daphne.
Yes.
And all I'm asking is that it shouldn't be that hard for the folks, you folks, to say yes. If you break even, then of course you can't give us anything. But if you start going up, doesn't mean that you can raise your salaries. You can have a party. And all I'm saying is, huh?
The government owes them $8 million?
No, the $9 million is understood. That's too clear. That's clean. But is the 8 plus 9 makes 17, and it covers 26, the remainder of 26, plus 27. I mean, 27 haven't started. If all of a sudden things start turning around and you start recovering, how can you say it was a gift? Today's the president. The president is what you need. And I'm just trying to get a commitment from you. I mean, I understand you got to go to bond counsel, but bond counsel should have said, offer whatever you can offer, as long as you get you guys on your foot. Go for it, Frank. Let me try you now.
I understand what you're saying, Senator.
Because you're a businessman. You know where I'm coming from. It's money.
Well, it all depends on the terms and the term sheet that we receive in exchange for those dollars. But you know what we'll be looking at too is triggers in the future where if we hit pre-COVID traffic, at which time we would have monies that are in excess of what we have for O&M, debt service, and reserves, then I think that's possible.
And that's what I'm saying. See, if you commit by making sure you're whole, right, and then you start going above. Frank knows where I'm coming from. You lease a bunch of properties, all of a sudden, you get a couple million here, a couple million here. I'm big at some. You can't just keep asking. And, I understand where you guys are coming from. There's other agencies that are doing the same thing. But because you're autonomous, I wish you were like GPA where you make all kinds of money and can go to the bond and get 100 million, but you can't right now. You need to get back on your feet. But, that's one of the things I really like to know, if Frank knows where I'm coming from, if the other folks there, the other three, Daphne, JQ, and Mr. Chairman can say, we can work this, then we can put the right verbiage in so that it makes sense. You exceed a percentage, you got to give back. But if the condition requires that you can't because you need to meet your operation needs, I understand. That's very clear. Can't threaten your bond market. You can't do any of that. But when you exceed, when you start making a profit, hey, por favor, you need to share. Because I remember way back there was a bill, there was a law that all the autonomous and all the agencies supposed to be paying the government of Guam. They never did up to now. And I know, JQ, you're a senator, you're a former senator, you know what I'm talking about. Nobody's ever given back to the general fund. And they're still having a party. But then they still come to this body and say, can you give us a little bit more? To do what? To do what you've been doing? You folks is that you're trying to recover from what some of the businesses are still recovering from, COVID and everything else, the impact of tourism. And I'm saying, if this body is willing to give you, to get you back on your feet so you can be, go full charge, why not? I'd rather take that risk than to ignore you and then hear you mention the news that the rates are going up to the airlines, and then when I'm going to fly, hi, $64, $94, I'm the wrong answer. And that is not just me, that's everybody flying out or people flying in. And who wants to come to Guam if it's going to cost me more when I can just go to another island somewhere else or stay in the mainland while everybody else rates going down? So can we at least say, JQ, how come we got no MAGA'HAGHNS? You got the chairman there, so
that's
some sense of commitment so we can feel that.
I think that's workable, Senator, but you're very overly optimistic.
Well, you have to be, JQ, because if you don't, then it's like going to the bank and saying, this is what I see. You give me something, I can build, I can grow, and I can pay you. Otherwise, we'll be like, maybe you just give you the 8 and say, never mind about 27, figure it out with the new governor. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And that's not where we should be going. Because whoever's going to take charge needs to be ready to handle whatever impact is going to happen in the first 100 days, first year. And that governor can't be coming back to the legislature saying, you were involved in that transaction. You see where I'm coming from, Jacob? And that's why I want to help you folks. Because I will be flying through the airport. I mean, I'll be buying a ticket, and we got to work this out. The people of Guam is going to need to see some savings. I mean, not saving from an increase. So I know we can work it out, JQ. I know you can. I know you can feel it. You're like, tight. It's tight. I know it's tight. But you know what? My time's running out. Mr. Chairman, thank you, and I will seriously look at an amendment to tie in the money, because the $9 million is for 27, really. It's not for 26, because 8.4 is 26. You're talking about next year. Next year, there's a new governor. Whoever it is, if we don't give the money They're already drowning to begin with. And that's not the way we should give anybody an opportunity to take over. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Snugstein. Vice Speaker Ada, you're recognized at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question. The bond defense, is that the 8.5, just for clarification?
For the defeasance, initially we had said 8, but it's likely going to be closer to 8.8 million.
8.8?
Yes, 8.8.
Oh, okay. So, you know, I know it's been a long day and everyone has already asked a lot of the questions that perhaps were very informative as to how we're moving forward. But in the wider scope, I know that a lot of RFPs have gone out and just waiting for those things to come back. Hopefully that we'll be able to move forward with getting either properties leased or concessions come in. In the onset of where I guess families now can go into the airport and
the cap.
The cap, right? How's that working out?
It's actually working very good, Senator. We had some kinks to it in the beginning, but we worked out through those hiccups. For example, in the beginning, we only had one individual that was authorized to submit those requests to TSA, and now we have a whole gamut of people that are authorized to submit that, not only during 8 to 5, but 24/7.
And they're allowed to shop in the duty-free there, and
that's the intent, is to have these folks come in, able to shop, able to dine, and also possibly see their loved ones off or their friends and relatives off, and escort them to the gate, and then of course exit out of the area.
Well, hopefully that program could, encourage more vendors to go into the concourses and, have set up little shops or whatever it may be. But, we look forward to ensuring that whatever goes on and how it moves forward, that, the airport sees the realization of the revenues to come in, so that, I know this is probably the first time to come down to the legislature asking for an appropriation, and just hope it may be the last, and where the airport will be able to self-sustain. And
that is our hope, and that is our intent, that hopefully this is just a one-time deal that we're asking. And we're hoping that geopolitical things happening around the world, that it gets better, so that definitely this can give us some positive vision forward.
And I know we were talking a little bit earlier about aviation maintenance and, attracting perhaps, what they call it?
MRO.
MROs.
It's a maintenance, repair, and overhaul.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hopefully we'll be able to get that coming to Guam, or, I know we either have to renovate or build new hangars, or, have the investors do that on a long term. And I'm glad that we were able to extend the lease term period, so that their investment would be able to, they see a realization of that turnaround. And
yes, sir. We did get some investors come in already to come and look at the property, and their intent is to build a facility, and they were targeting wide body aircraft, not just the narrow body, but wide body aircraft, and that it was their intent. They were looking at 30-year, but when they found out that it was a 50, they definitely came to the area to do a site visit. So there's potential investors that are out there that are looking at that type of operation.
Oh, okay. Well, that's great to hear. Mr. Chair, that's the only couple of questions I had, and if I have any more, I'll go on to round 2, but thank you for that.
Thank you, Vice Speaker. Senator Tadigue, you recognize?
Thank you so much, and thank you everyone for being here as well. I'm just got a few questions here, and one of them is a question that I don't think was ever answered. It was asked regarding what is and this is to Daphne. Again, can you just give me the figure amount, the amount of increase to these airlines altogether is going to generate how much funding that you're looking for? If it was increased, how much would this total amount be? What would it yield?
So if you will refer to the FY 2027 budget, and there is a page there with our signatory airline revenues, just from our signatory airline revenue, for our signatory airline rents and fees, we're expected to generate about $61.2 million.
No, I'm talking about just the airline's fees. So you plan on increasing aeronautical fees, right?
Correct.
Which is landing and things like that.
Yes.
Okay. So how much, if you were to increase it, what is it going to yield? Is it like 10 million, 8 million? How much will it yield?
If you'll refer to, and perhaps if you could refer to page 1 of 3 of our Exhibit E, maybe that would be helpful.
No, just tell, okay, let's say, put it this way, Daphne. If you're not going to increase the airline fees, okay?
Yes.
And then we give you the money for it, and that's fine, it's done. But now let's say we don't give you the money and you have to increase the airline fees.
Yes.
How much total will that be from the airlines only, not from your concession stands, not from anything else, just that?
Are you referring to FY 2026 or are you referring to FY 2027?
Have you increased the airline fees today?
No.
Okay, I'm talking about the potential of increasing these airlines. All these letters from these airlines complaining about how it's going to be, if they increase it, they look at leaving. So you've come up, from what I heard, it's like 140% increase from what they're being charged currently. That's what I was told. That's quite a bit of increase. So can you tell me a dollar amount?
So it's going to be an increase of $20.07 per, it's a CPE increase of $20.07 per enplanement.
How much will that yield?
And then if we have enplanements of 1.11359, that's $22.3 million, right? So that's
22 point.
Just from that increase.
Okay, so it's going to yield 22 million, what?
22.3 million.
22.3 million, there we go. Okay, when's the last time we increased the aeronautical fees at the Guam airport? When's the last time these fees went up?
We've increased them every year.
Yep, it goes every year. That's the average. That's usually what all airports do. They do it yearly, right?
Yes.
When you increased them last year,
yes.
I mean, did you increase them last year?
We did.
Okay, and what was that percentage?
We increased it by 6%.
And what is the increase this year by?
The increase is projected to be about almost 60%.
So you're going from 1 year of an increase to aeronautical fees from 6% last year, and then this year you're asking these airlines to increase it to 60% increase. Is that correct? I just want to, yes or no, is that correct?
Right.
Okay.
But there's a reason why. Yes. And so as I mentioned before, you know, in 2019 we had done some debt restructuring, which allowed for some immediate savings during COVID time. But of course, those deferral of the payment, those bond payments, right, the savings on those debt service payments, the annual debt service payments is done. And so now we're seeing our debt service rise. We're also seeing the need to, because we've not been able to collect or from the prior year revenues, we were not able to fill our O&M reserve, so that's another piece that we need to try to collect for. Okay. And then in FY 2027, we have $9 million in our share for FAA-funded projects, and those projects are going to be completed, and so we need to have those monies. So that's why, you know, again, it seems like it's a lot, and actually, yes, it is a lot. However, you know, there is a reason why, Senator.
Okay, well, it is a lot. You know, it's from 6% yearly that's increased to 60%. I can see why they're very upset at this point, and how are they going to survive, considering everything that's going on in travel in Asia in this part has not been very good, you know. Also, before we move on, and if there was a correction earlier, I don't know if anybody knows this, but on page 1 of 1, under actuals 2025, you have here 53,169,478, when I believe the OPA report was actually 54,500,000. Is that correct?
Yes, and we're going to go ahead and look at why that may be. There may just have been adjustment that was not reflected, but our actual expenses for FY25 audited was about 54.5 million.
Okay, so I hope my colleagues hear that too, so they can make the adjustments on their documents too to reflect it was 54,500 in actuals in FY25. And the amount that was generated in revenue for FY25 was 69,367,906. So if your expenditures was only 54,500, 54,500,000, but you were able to generate 69,367,990, was any of that funding set aside in case of any, you know, you wanted to do any austere measures where you have to, you know, put money aside or not work on something, you know, like that? Was any of that money set aside, or did you spend the full amount?
So what you're looking at is really just the income statement piece, right? Our income less our expenses. But what's not reflected there is, of course, our debt service, which is not on our income statement, and our debt service is 18.6 million. So if you add 18 to 59, that actually
54,
gives,
right?
54.
Yeah.
That actually gives you 72, right? And that's actually 18.6 is what our debt service. So that 72 is even above the 72 in cash outlays, and that does not include also, of course, anything that's capitalized. And our large FAA projects, you won't see them on our income statement except through amortization or depreciation, which is just a fraction of what the actual cash outlay is. And so that's why, although you'll see, yes, we have revenues or net income, I guess, in excess of what's showing here in terms of our cash outlays, we actually have additional items that are not reflected here, our debt service and our other capital projects.
So it looks like you were short then, if you were looking at your 69. So it looks like you were about $2 million, a little bit over $2 million short. Almost $3 million short between your expenditures and what you actually, your revenue that came in, right?
Actually, if you look at the page 3 of 3 and the 2 middle columns, which is our actual estimate versus our budget for 2026.
Oh, it's more than that then.
Right. So you'll see.
How did you pay that though? I mean, that was FY25. How were you able to pay your expenses?
So that's, and again, that's part of the challenges. We've used up our O&M reserves and not been able to replenish it. And then that's, again, the reason why that our rates are going up.
Okay, so you went into your reserves. How much right now is in your reserve balance?
In our O&M reserve, we have about 3 million, but we really need to have 15.
Why?
Because we are required to have 25% of our NOM. 25% of our O&M in our O&M reserves.
Is that just an accounting thing, or is that by
law?
No,
it's a requirement because of our bonds.
So how long have you been short? Since this was 2025, how long have you been not having the right amount of reserves?
Well, last year we needed to fill 6, and we were not able to fill 6. And so, of course, there's this accumulation. Now we're not only just trying to fill the 6 we weren't able to fill last year, but we're adding then another 6, right?
So if $15 million is supposed to be in the reserve, does this affect your bond indentures?
Well, it can impact us, and that's why we're working to try to fill it, and that's why each year we've tried to pass it on through our rates to the airlines. But again, when our numbers are coming short, we're not able to.
So this $17 million that that's being proposed in this legislation, is any of that going into the reserves?
Yes.
How much of that?
The 9.2 of the aviation fuel tax
will go into the reserve.
Yes, because
you're still short the 15, though.
No, we're short 12. So we have it's 15 minus 3 is 12 minus 9
But
right?
you have to have 15 million in there, is that what you said? Or was it 12
We have to have
million?
25% of our O&M,
Okay.
or of our operation and maintenance expenses in there.
And what is that amount?
It's just shy of 15 million, 14.7 million perhaps.
So, okay, so you're going to put 12 million of this 17 million that we're giving into your reserves?
No, we actually have to use a portion of the...
Or 9 million.
For the defeasance, right?
Yeah.
So only the remaining portion is going to be able to be put into the reserves.
Yeah. Is there any fines or penalties or anything that can jeopardize the port if you don't have that funding in the reserve?
You know that.
Okay, so that brings me back to the bond and the bondholders. You're trying to reach a 1.2 percentage versus what you have right now. I think it's about 0.71 to 0.74.
0.74.
Yeah, and if you are trying to avoid, these bonds being called in, is that could happen, right? If you don't have that money in the reserves?
Well, of course, that is why we've asked for some additional funding, one. And then also, through the year, we're hopeful again, if we're able to, through the year, fill that to be what it needs to be. We actually built into the budget 12 million. And so, again, we're not, as part of this process that we've been discussing to try to reduce the rates or get the FY27 rates down to FY26 levels, we're not going to reduce what's in the budget, the entire 12, if we get only 9. So we're still going to work to include 3 million of that in the budget so that we can have or make sure that our O&M reserve is at the level it should be.
How much bond debt and debt are you at the airport? What is that amount? How many series? Well, first, let me ask you, how many bonds do you have out there? Series A, B, C, like that? And how much total are they all together?
We have 174,175,000 in bonds outstanding. We have our 2021 series is 59.64 million. 2023 series is 46.725 million, and our 2024 series is 67.81 million.
A total of 174?
174,175.
Okay. So have you received any letter? I mean, considering the situation you're at right now, have you received any notification from bondholders that they are willing to they're ready to call in the note because you haven't been able to had the reserves at its proper amount, or they're coming into a situation where, I'm sure they're watching. Everybody's watching. I mean, these hearings that we're having and the sky is falling on this, situation. Have you had any notification from bond?
No, but we have been in communication with our bond counsel and also our underwriters again, and that's why even ahead of this, even though there's no appropriation yet, we are laying the foundation already to pull the trigger on a defeasance so that way, as soon as we got this monies, then we can pull the trigger for FY26, address our issues for 2026.
The other question I had, I wanted to make sure, because I think the director was mentioning the GM was mentioning that this is going to go in, Senator San Agustin was asking a question that this is going to handle 2026, and this is also going to go into take care of 2027. But that's not what I gathered. This 17 million is going to stabilize, from what I gather, the financial situation at the airport and then provide a little funding, but that's up to FY26. So that's September 30th, FY26. So is any of this funding at all going to take care of 2027?
Yes, and
So you don't have to come back here and asking us for more money or anything like that.
Well,
in 2027.
If it's 17.7 million, then it's only going to be taking care of a portion of 2027.
There it is. So only a portion of it. Mm-hmm. Well, how much is a portion?
So as we were discussing earlier, if you remember, the 9 million, right? So if we're able to fill or use the 9 million to fill our O&M, we still are we're starting off with 55 CPE. And again, for every million that we don't have to pass on to our airlines through rates and charges, we can reduce our CPE by $1.
Right,
So
yeah, I heard
if we're at 52, because we already take 55 minus the 3 million in savings we're able to find in our expenses, and 52 minus 9 brings us to 43, a CPE of 43. And that's what
Still higher than FY25
It
or
is,
26. It's still higher, though.
Yes, and that's why we're saying this particular piece of legislation as is will address the issue of FY26, which is really very immediate. We need to take care of it. For FY27, it will address it, but again, not entirely to bring it down to the levels of FY26 rates or CPE.
What do you need to take it down to the FY26 level?
So we need, if you take 43 minus 34.99, so 43 minus 35 is...
How much more do you need to take this down?
8. Another 8 million.
Another 8 million to be given to the airport to take this down.
Yes.
The airlines are more worried about the aeronautical fees than they are about the CPE, right? Is that?
So, I mean, the CPE is an indicator of the rate. The CPE is not exactly the rate, but it is a metric that's used, again, across the nation to determine what the rates are. And so, you know, you can look at different airports and compare what, and have a comparison as to the cost of that airport using the CPE.
Yeah, and this is passed on to the passenger, right?
So, you know, what we do is we bill the airlines, right? That's part of our airline agreement for what, so that way for our cost recovery. So it's a cost recovery methodology as we work on our rates and charges that we use it's called a cost recovery methodology. And that is, we don't pass on anything to the actual passengers. We just charge the airlines.
Right?
Yes.
Okay, so this will be passed on to the passengers. You know, it's going to cost even more to go to. So what happened in Saipan? What did they do? I mean, they were in a even dire situation than you are in. What have they done, you know, to cut the costs? Did they stop the extension, the building? Did they adjust based on what their situation was? And did they stop hiring people or even letting people go?
Well, Saipan's having it harder than we are. So they're down to 64-hour work weeks, our employment. So they're not hiring. The number of visitors has gone down, but there is some hope. I believe the Japan flight from United is going to restart in, I believe, October, as well as their flight to Manila on Philippine Airlines. But they only have two fees. One is a landing fee, and the other one is a rental rate.
I see. What is, Mr. Byrne or Lester, what is yielding the 4 cents every year? From the, I think it was 1987 when they created legislation for the 4%. They didn't bother to put it anywhere or use for anything other than going into the general fund. And it was up to the administration to decide where that 4% went, whether it went to Guam Highway Fund, as you mentioned earlier, Lester, about kind of guesstimate that that 4 cents went to the highway fund. But how much does it yield every year? The 4 cents. And then now where is it at today at 8 cents? And is it fully put into, is that full 8 cents given to the airport now since 2023?
Okay, let me start this.
Sure.
I think I'll have to pass it back to Mr. Carlson. So the amount that gets paid to the airport is only the increase. So 4 cents out of the 8 cents gets paid to the airport. Year to date, that's just been about $1 million. So it's going to be about 1.3, 1.4 million in a full year. And previously, the 4 cents and it still continues to be paid that way, actually goes into the Territorial Highway Fund and is used as the legislature directs the Highway Fund appropriation to be reused.
Mr. Burns, there's nothing in the law that says that 4% will go into that special fund. It just goes into the general fund. Is there anything in the law that actually says it goes in the Territory Highway Fund, that 4 cents?
Well, I think it's in each budget that
It's requested in there?
Yes.
But there's really nothing in the law, there's nothing codified that requires that 4 cents, that first 4 cents that was created to go into a special fund.
Actually, I would have to look and see
Okay.
what the law says, but for many, many years, it's gone into the highway fund.
Yeah. And it yields about 1.3 million, is that what you said yearly?
Yeah, 1.3, 1.4.
Okay.
But that's only part of,
Right, the
because it's only
8
aviation
cents.
fuel.
Right. Understand. And then that other 4 cents that was increased to 8, so that one is by law given to the general fund to then transfer over to the airport. That was supposed to be done.
It's an FAA regulation.
Okay.
It's not in our law.
An FAA regulation that anytime taxes are, okay, I'm almost,
If there's an
I'll save it
increase,
for the,
yes,
I'll get into it on the next one. My time is already up. You don't have to answer it, Lester. I kind of figure it. Thank you. Yeah, I'll get you on the second round. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator Typhooon. Colleagues, we will start at 08:30 tomorrow. I believe we're going to try to finish this bill this week. So we have a number of floor amendments as well to discuss. So we'll see how things look tomorrow. But we'll see you bright and early at 08:30. We're in recess.